about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
Devil, my friend. Oh, yeah. I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out.
Devil, sir, I would think it would be incredibly safe to assume that 2024 has been a banner year for us, as in the first year, the debut, and the end, to a certain degree, of season 1 of Vampire and Devil. And per the Fangs and Inferno's choices, I'd say we owe them, as chosen by them, a little year in review on movies not that we chose, but that they chose.
Oh yeah, you know, we gave the Fangs and the Infernos and all the ghouls out there a little bit of choice, you know. I think we gave them like 10 movies that were horror movies that were people have talked about, some good, some not so good, and gave them all a choice to pick their top 5. And it was tough to try to get a top 5 because everybody wanted to do Terrifier 3 and just vote for Terrifier 3. I'm like, you can vote for other ones. I mean, it's nice
Right.
that you wanted to vote for Terrifier 3. It won by like 7,000 votes. So I'm like, it doesn't need your help anymore. You can vote for something else to see what else you're going to get into. But yeah, you know, other than Terrifier 3, we're going to talk about a couple other movies. And, you know, with this being, you know, normally when we usually talk about movies, we tend to talk about movies that have came out. You know, sometimes we do some current ones, but most of the movies we talk about have either, you know, come out within a few years or are super old. So we're just going to give the warning for each time we talk about each movie. We're going to give the spoiler alert for anybody out there who hasn't seen some of these movies, you know, that we are going to talk about stuff and, you know, we could possibly ruin your movie experience. But then again, if you're watching a review for a movie you haven't seen yet, that's on you, not on us.
That is absolutely for sure. But no, you're right, my friend. It was actually pretty funny because I think our beloved ghouls kind of misunderstood where they, I think, initially saw the post and the poll as a vote on what movie was your favorite of 2024. And of course, yeah, it was a landslide victory for Terrifier 3. And of course, it will be discussed in this episode. But I just thought it was funny where I think they didn't realize, like, hey, pick what 5 of these movies you liked the best. I think they just looked at it as well, here are kind of like the heavy hitters of 2024. Vote for what you think is the best. And I can't help but get a little chuckle out of it because the way that we personally designed this show is, as the old saying goes, we know better. And if we're putting together a poll of vote for which movie of 2024 you want us to talk about, it's most likely not going to involve Terrifier 3 because we already knew how that story was going to play out. We already knew how that death was going to occur.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, there's been some good movies coming out, 2024. There's been some bad horror movies that have come out in 2024, just like every year. But there were definitely some other ones that were on the list that didn't get the love. Then there were other ones that we could have picked and choose, but we kind of stuck to our our normal ways of doing stuff. I mean, we try to do it not too hardcore, up there in the mainstream era. But Terrifier 3, even though the Terrifier series to me, at least for the first two, are always going to be considered low budget and DIY, and even the third one still is. But now it's become such a huge franchise that everybody and their mother is going to go see this movie. So it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, like when you used to listen to a band, you're like, no, man, I liked them better when nobody thought they were cool. Now all of a sudden, now everybody thinks they're cool, which is, I mean, like I said, yeah, all respect for Damien and David and the Terrifier guys and all that stuff like that. I mean, it's awesome. I'm glad that this franchise has gotten blown up the way that it is. But then again, it's just like now it's to the point where, oh, I love Terrifier and Art the Clown. Yeah, do you really? Are
Right.
you just on the third Terrifier 3 bandwagon, or are you like old school like short, or that those that kind of fans, the old school fans. So it's fun. But like I said, we're gonna talk about Terrifier 3. We're gonna talk about a bunch of ones, but like I said, on our top five, we had Terrifier 3, we had Abigail, we had Salem's Lot, we had Long Legs, and we had Smile too. So there was a good mix of different kind of movies. So it's gonna be an interesting talk. There's some similarities between some of these movies, but then there are a couple other ones out there that are way different.
Absolutely, my friend, 100%. So, what do you say we jump into this as we discuss a earlier 2024 movie and discuss a semi more recent 2024 movie? So, let's have a fun little discussion as we break down Abigail and Smile 2. And why don't we start with the movie that's a little bit, longer in release and less likely for spoilers before we get to the next one. And let's talk about one of the movies on the list that definitely hits a little bit closer to myself as we talk a little bit about a very unique kind of new school spin on vampirism, but also is a reference to a very traditional vampire movie as we talk a little bit about Abigail, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, to me, I remember, I know, if anybody doesn't know, that Vampire doesn't typically like trailers, so he tries to stay away from the trailers because he likes to be, and with Abigail, it was different than, when you went and seen, a movie like From Dusk Till Dawn. When we went and seen that movie, we had no idea, because even the trailer when it was cut, the original trailer just talked about the Gecko brothers and them doing their running and from the law and all that, so you weren't expecting it. And that was what was different a little bit with Abigail. Like, you knew it was going to be a vampire movie. You knew in the very beginning of the trailer that's about these people that are kidnapping this girl, and when they kidnap this girl, yeah, she's not particularly really a little ballerina girl. that she's gonna fuck some shit up
Yeah.
because she's actually a vampire. And I liked it. I mean, I liked the trailer, but then again, it would have been cooler to have not known that and just think that it's just the regular heist kind of movie, and then all of a sudden you get that. But I mean, other than that, like I said, I mean, to me, I thought this movie was awesome. I was a huge fan of this movie, a huge fan of all the actors and actresses that were in this movie. The little girl that played freaking Abigail was freaking amazing. I thought she just played that, that cuteness where she's so innocent and you're like, oh my God, you kind of feel sorry for this girl. And then you're like, oh shit, I feel sorry for the other guys now because they're about to get their shit torn up.
No, 100%. And that's basically my thing. Like when we go out to the theaters and we watch movies and stuff like that, just like anybody who goes out to watch a movie, you can't really avoid the trailers of movies unless you either leave the theater or you choose to show up walk into the theater, about 20 minutes or so into start time and stuff like that. And that's always something that I'm, willing to sacrifice and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I was so committed to the not having anything spoiled for Beetlejuice that even when we went to the theaters together to see a movie and that trailer came up, I was just so committed to it that I was like, nah, you know what? Hood over my face. I'm going to cover my ears. Look, I don't care about hearing like some one-liners and stuff like that. It's no big deal. But I was so committed to just going in blind because that's how I wanted it, that was a time I was willing to just kind of shut myself off during like a trailer in a theater. But other than that, you know what? I understand it. I get it. Like I'm down to watch them, whatever, because that's another decision that you make on your own. But yeah, the fact of the matter is just the way that it is now, which I can to a certain degree understand, that you really want to try to catch fangs and get them interested in a movie because that's how you make money as a studio. I just find that most, if not all of them, they just can't get the trailer right as far as what to show versus what not to show. So teaser trailers are more my jam, but I just, if it's a trailer that I know I'm going to be watching for 2 minutes, it's going to show me everything I don't want to see. And you're right. I think Abigail was another, just example of that. But at the same time, it didn't take away from the overall enjoyment of the movie because I definitely thought that everything about this movie was great. And it is funny because, kicking it off, it's a heist movie, but it starts off like very heisty. Even watching this movie, I was kind of like, none of this feels like a horror movie to me. It was just a very interesting opening to the movie. It all made sense. Everything was explained, even had a certain amount of Saw feel to it with the way that John Kramer thought, would see his victims or get his hands on people, which I thought was kind of very interesting. But yeah, it starts out just very heisty, planning everything out, every move down to a particular detail. They've only got a certain amount of time to get it done, and establishing almost kind of Reservoir Dog style, since we're throwing out movie references, or I am, no names, make sure that you're only seen so often or so much of you. But yeah, it's very heistish, very just kind of action, drama feel before all of a sudden you start noticing things and issues start arising. And it actually kind of had a little bit of a build, like it looked like it was going to be a slow burn, but then it really kicked in relatively quick, where, as the old saying goes, it started off with just the tip, and then, it really got into it. So I did like the way that they designed it, where at first it kind of gets you thinking with the other side of your brain, like, damn, when's the action going to happen? But honestly, in the blink of an eye, then it began.
Yeah, and I like once that action comes around, man, it gets so cool. It's like, it's that, that cat and mouse kind of, cockiness where she knows she's got the upper hand on all these people because of her being a vampire and them being basically, mortals, and basically, so she's like playing with her food to, to a certain extent. But I mean, I liked it, like all the little details and stuff like that, like when they're going around the house, and even before you knew that, obviously she was a vampire, they're checking out parts of the house, and the one girl goes into like a room that's like got like a lot of old kind like paintings and stuff like that, and it's very vampirish. It
Yeah.
shows like that, but it's not to the full point where you would see it and automatically know that it's vampires, but it has that like vampiric kind of feel to it. So you kind of like noticing, okay, then certain things, and then like when the house shuts down, kind of reminded me a little bit of like what was it, the House on Haunted Hill, like
Yeah.
when the whole entire house shuts down, or even like 13 Ghosts, when
Or
when the house shuts down or stuff like that, where the house is basically, you're trapped in this house within, for 24 hours or however long it's gonna go up. And that's basically like, I love it. And like I said, the whole entire time, you're seeing this little like 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl that's just this ballerina, and then the one girl goes in and she tries to make sure she's all right, and she's like, I'm so sorry you have to die. And then she's just like, okay, what? And it's like, yeah, then it just, when she starts going into her attack mode and just
yeah.
messing people up, man, it gets pretty gruesome, and it gets some pretty cool. You get some really cool kills. You get some really good like vampire action in this movie.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. And I love the idea of it coming out as like, the hunted becoming the hunter, or really was never the hunted to begin with, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, she set up everything. And I thought it was just, particularly interesting. And I liked the idea not only of just the way that, like, the kills were happening, but I loved the new school spin on how to take vampires out. Like, for example, one of the scenes that doesn't lead to, a kill per se, but really caught me off guard is, Abigail basically says, like, look, your old school cinematic, novel, kills don't work on vampires. That's not how it works. Like, I don't care about garlic. It's tasty. I don't care about this. I don't care that. But there are certain things that they truly did keep proper, which is a stake to the heart and sunlight. And the thing I thought was super duper cool was when there's one particular struggle of Abigail trying to get her prey, and then the shutters opened, and it hits her skin, and her whole hand just explodes, like just covering everybody in blood. And it was so unexpected that I was like, wow. But it also leads to the never ending life kind of thing, because she's able to regenerate another hand, which I thought was, very, very cool. So it had a little bit of that, ability to heal, a little bit of that Wolverine-ish aspect to it for Marvel fans out there. But I just thought it was really cool. I liked the whole like explosion type of thing. It still kicks back to other vampire movies that have done similar things, like vampires being turned to ash and stuff like that. But it was just such a sudden just explosion. Like, there was no delays. It was just that thing was just gone. And it's just like, wow, okay, we're going that with their allergens to sunlight. I was like, you know what? That's cool. I like that. And I also loved the spin in the movie of very old school serial killer-ish, with like the underground kind of basement den of bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool when you found out, yeah, that she's been doing, been trapping all these people, that have wronged her or wronged, things that they've done and stuff like that. She's basically got this like moat of dead bodies. But the part that I thought was kind of cool too was like, in the very beginning when they kidnap her, they use like some kind of like, a needle where it's got like some kind of serum, and it supposedly knocks her out. So they're like, okay, maybe this will work. And they try to do it again, and they're like, okay, maybe it does. But then again, you never really know if that really worked against her or not, because a lot of times she's playing, she's been playing possum the whole entire time in this movie. So you never really know. Like even in the movie when they finally do trap her and they got her in like the little elevator, little behind bars, and they're going, she's trying to persuade the person to let her. If you let me out, I'll let you survive, and the rest will all die. And they're like, thinking about it, and they're like, ah, no. And then she just like boom explodes the freaking thing. It's like, I could have got out any time.
Yeah.
I just been fucking with you the whole entire time. I like that, and I like the fact that when you're getting into the more movie when she turns some of the other actors and some of the characters into vampires. And you obviously have the main guy who is this heist, who's kind of been the asshole to everybody throughout the whole entire movie. So of course he's gonna turn into a vampire, and so he's gonna be this vampire bad guy who's like beating the shit out of Abigail the whole time and trying to do the upper hand. But you know what I mean? He's she's able to turn, and he thinks that he's gonna turn this girl and stuff like that, and then comes into the one of the lines that I love in the movie where she's like, yeah, it takes a while to learn all the cool shit. Where it's like, yeah, it reminded me of like, where you saw vampire movies, like, where, they can do this and they can do that. And I always hated movies like that when they just turned and they're able to do all these cool shit. And it's like, you wouldn't know how to do any of that shit. You would have to like progressively been a vampire for so long to kind of know what you can do and what you can't do. I mean, there's obviously the things that you can do, like you're gonna have the superhuman strength and a couple little things and stuff like that. But yeah, I love that where it was like, yeah. I mean, you're just a turned vampire right now. So even though it seemed like he had the upper hand on her a lot of time, even when he was a vampire, he never really did because she knew that he didn't know all the cool shit to being a vampire. Obviously, she's you see her as a 13-year-old girl. They never really tell you how old she is, but she could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So
Yeah. All you really do know is that she's, while yeah, she's turned as a 13-year-old girl, so a 13-year-old girl she'll stay, but that doesn't change the fact that like she could be a 313-year-old girl, like kind of a
yeah,
thing, so she could have easily had plenty of time to have learned all the cool little tricks and stuff. And I loved the overall aspect though of like, the girl that was kind of in charge, the victim, that's in charge of like looking out for Abigail, but still kind of tries to connect. They're all just there for like a payday to like get them all out of their own various, just personal debts, are just the way I'm going to explain it. But even the same kind of Jedi mind trick though, where you've got Abigail kind of saying how, well, playing the victim card at the same time while, fucking with everybody's, brains, and about, well, is it true? Is it not? Where she's like, using her dad as this just misogynistic villain, who just like just locks her up and beats her all the time and kind of does all this horrific thing. Like, no, like he should be a loving father and stuff, when the reality of it is like, yeah, he's just as bad, but she has just been doing her own thing. Like, this is how she likes to it. She's enlisted somebody who basically, she caught and basically negotiated like, look, well, I've got this dirt on you, but I'm going to turn you and you're going to work for me and you're going to help me get the people that I need, which ultimately also ties into one of the specific victims who knew this person this guy on a personal level, outside of all the vampirism. But I always just thought it was really cool because, again, like I said, at the beginning of our discussion, this is a spin off the old school Dracula's Daughter.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought it was kind of cool because, you get this beginning of this guy who she's kidnapping is a big, huge, like, crime boss, and, like, he's this big, huge thing. And then you keep hearing these little stories about him and all this little stuff that no one's really seen him, or no one's really knows what's going on with this family. And then like you said, when it comes down to towards the end, you find out that all these people are somewhat connected because they've all sort of worked for her father, or did something that something wrong to her father or something like that, and she's just kind of like, maybe if I do this, my dad will notice me, kind of thing. So she's like, maybe if I take out his adversaries or people who have wronged him, or any of this kind of stuff, maybe he'll love me again, and and be there for me all the time, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, when you get to the end of the movie where you finally get to see his character, and he comes out and his father, and he's like your typical vampire dad, big guy coming out, ooh, I'm going to get everybody. But yeah, you find out that yeah, maybe he is a little bit of a softie.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, because and that was actually something I thought was very cool, is because while I did love, again, the new school interpretation where you have, Abigail, who's got her fangs, but she's also really got those just like power jaws of teeth, very kind of 30 Days of Night style, or like Jaws shark style, very, very interesting and unique. Her father, who, yeah, still has that same kind of design, but I personally loved the fact that the makeup department, the director, whoever would be in charge of that particular visual, it was a very like Christopher Lee style looking vampire, which I really did love, because hey, I can totally appreciate, as the older we get and the more vampire movies we get, there's going to be a lot of different spins, a lot of different ways of looking at things, kind of, as things like change over time. Like, nobody's going to be a pure blood vampire anymore. There's going to be all kinds of different, like, mixes and and mutts and combinations, like kind of like Harry Potter style. There's not going to be any pure bloods. Everybody's going to kind of be like a muggle meets like mudblood kind of thing. But I did like the fact that they still kept a nuance and a subtlety to the classic Universal Monsters kind of style, or Hammer film style vampire. I really did love that kind of Christopher Lee look of the father vampire. I thought that was very, very cool. And then, and as you get towards like the end of the movie too, even when it comes to like the credits, I love the fact that, we love movies, we love cinematography, and, we get lost in these things and we become very partial to characters. But I also got to give a little nod of respect to when a, movie loses a cast member unexpectedly. If the opportunity presents itself to include them in a special way, they do it, and this movie was no exception.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. It was like I can't remember the actor's name off of hand right now, but I remember he was the character that was the driver, and apparently he died from an accidental overdose. So it was nice for them to mention, have a little in memory, in memoriam for him, which sometimes you don't get, you don't get that chance, like especially if it's already done edited, it's already finished product. You can't, it's tough to go back and add that, even if that's a small little thing. Sometimes when it comes to movies and stuff like that, TV shows, you can kind of put that, because you can always just run what you already have and then splice it with a little bit of that little extra in memoriam. But with movies, once it's already in print, it's pretty much a done deal. So I thought that was kind of cool that they did did a little thing for them.
Yeah, Angus Cloud.
Yeah. That I knew he had an odd name. I was like, I remember it being something that wasn't a very common name. But yeah, Angus Cloud, that was the guy's name. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And like I said, I think overall, I really dug this movie. I thought it was a fun movie. Like you said, it did have a little bit of the throwbacks of the old school, like, maybe Nosferatu and the Billion Teeth, but it did remind me more of the Hammer films.
Yes.
Of the vampire, those late 70s, early 80s, Hammer films with Christopher Lee and all that stuff. It definitely did have a feel of like those kind of movies, but to me.
No, absolutely. And again, I love the new school spin on like how to take out a vampire, because yeah, when they were staked, when they were put out into the sunlight, you just got these be all end all explosions that also took like no time, which I actually really liked. I was like, so okay, so if you're put directly into the sunlight, almost kind of like, where you see it, almost kind of like, almost like a nod to like Medusa, where it's like, hey, look, as long as you can avoid the eye contact, you won't turn to stone. But so, like, for example, the sunlight only hit Abigail's hand and boom. But like the other kills that they use sunlight in, mixed with anybody, who was fully staked traditional style. I mean, it was just like, you just knew you were fucked. It was just like, no, it's a wrap. And pow, they are just gone, just missed. Just drink of my blood, red mist style. It was just super duper awesome, which I really liked all of that. So I can always appreciate, a new vision of how they want to do things in movies, especially movies that have such a long standing history. Like Nosferatu itself, celebrated its 100-year anniversary only 2 years ago. So I mean, vampires in film have been around an incredibly long time. So I can always appreciate some kind of new take, some kind of new vision. But I do love when there's certain little nods. And, and don't get me wrong, like it wouldn't have, if this movie had stayed designed the same way, I wouldn't have been mad in any way, shape, or form at the fact that, Abigail's father might have looked any other way. He could, maybe he was a biker, or maybe he was this, or maybe he was that. That wouldn't have bothered me had the movie stayed completely the same. But the fact that he comes across still as that Hammer style, just posh, proper, like, businessman, kind of English, whatever they call those, like proper,
like the lords.
Yeah, like the Lords.
Yeah,
kind of like one of the things I loved about a movie called The Invitation that came out a while back, that I love the English spin-off classic vampirism from the UK. But yeah, I love the fact that he had that very prim and proper look to him, slicked back hair. Again, like we said, very Christopher Lee, very Hammer film. So anyway, man, I just think it's a very cool movie. When it comes to vampires, I definitely look at it pretty high when it comes to like a cool spin on things. So I definitely enjoyed this one a lot, man. I thought it was super duper cool. Just very, very well done. And as we continue on, why don't we go into our more recent, and let's talk a little bit about Smile 2, which you and I, watched recently, and very, very cool. Obviously a sequel, Smile came out, a year or so ago, a couple of years ago. And I thought that movie was great. I really enjoyed it. I thought everything about that movie was very unique. That whole kind of like demonology, possession, being stalked by a, entity was a very, very cool, very unique way to do it. And when it came to this one, the thing that I found to be very dominant as a cool factor when it came to this is, if you've seen the original movie, you've already kind of got the gist of how it works. So with this movie, you understood how the entity was working and how it was messing with, the main character. But I did like a lot with this movie that it was about that one character. Yes, the first Smile movie still involved a main character, but it was still more about also learning the other ways that this was a thing, before ultimately settling on the victim of the first movie. When it came to this movie, I loved the fact that it was just full on from start to finish, this pop singer dealing with her demons, no pun intended, that kept derailing her career, to ultimately trying to get back on track. She's still considered a very, like Lady Gaga level performer, with all these other people that she's listening to, her mom as her manager, her, personal assistants and all that kind of stuff, but then dealing with not only what the entity is causing, but the fact that it's also using her real life personal demons that she caused to herself.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool. Like I said, this movie, like even like I said with the first one, even with this one too, the marketing genius on these movies were stellar upon. I mean, they had people in baseball stadiums and stuff like that with their smiles the whole entire time, on these shows and that shows and stuff like that. So I thought it was a really cool marketing genius, and they did the same thing for part two, which I thought was really really cool. And I like it because it's one of those ones that, like, yeah, you watch, if you wanted to watch them, you could watch them back to back. It kind of reminded me of, like, even though now that Halloween 2 is not considered Halloween 2 anymore, but in back in the day when you watched the original Halloween and Halloween 2, it was the same continual night where it was like you go. And I like how, like, this comes, it goes right into it. It's a, I think it's within like a day or two from like that, so it's still the continuation where the main guy at the very end, the cop that was the one of the guys at the end of the movie, all of a sudden he gets this, he ends up getting it, and it just continues with him where, he's like, oh, I'm gonna go to these drug dealers' houses, and even when he goes to that drug dealer's house, you can still see the person that was burning in the first movie is still, even after a couple of days, I don't know how they're still burning after a couple of days, but apparently after a couple of days they're still burning. I think it was just to make it show like that continuity and, like, of where he was at. Yeah, and it was cool. You had that continuation, so you had that same actor from the first movie going right back into it, and doing that and trying to do that, trying to get these curses. He's like, well, fuck it, if I'm gonna get rid of this, this curse, why not give it to a bunch of drug dealers that are pieces of shit anyway?
Yeah.
So he goes in, tries to kill the one drug dealer, try to get the other one there, and then all of a sudden, somebody knocks on the door, comes in, and all of a sudden, this drug dealing house is like the craziest beginning in the world. Like, everybody and their mother is like coming to this house. All of a sudden, you're like, what the hell? The guy's
Right.
like, I figured these guys would be alone, and then it goes to this and that like that. And eventually, it just goes down to the drug dealer friend who is friend of the main the main actress in this movie, the main character, the singer, the Lady Gaga ish of the movie, and that's what ties it into it, into that. And like I said, that curse going from, that this demonic curse going from him to her. And just like in the original movie, when she shows up to this dude's house, and when you watch a Smile movie, that's what I like about these kind of movies. You're gonna see some fucked up shit, and it's cool.
Yeah.
It's like The Ring or anything like those kind of movies where you know you're gonna see some crazy self-harming shit. And that's what I liked about the first movie was you had a lot of that, people bashing their heads over with, like, hammers, or cutting their tongues off, or cutting their throats and stuff like that. So when you go into this movie, you're gonna see the same thing. So I liked that. It was very well done as far as continuing from that storyline from the first movie right into the second movie, with just going straight into it, right away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And ultimately our main girl gets the entity attached to her because the drug dealer that you were familiar with, who was basically in charge of like hooking up with like her like kind of like Percocets or Xanax, like the stuff that not only takes the pain of her body away, but also just the other stuff she needs to kind of like fight her demons, which she's kind of doing still in secrecy, because her manager and handlers and record label, they all basically think that she's back on the straight and narrow, but she's still kind of taking like perks because she kind of like needs them, not so much for drug addiction purposes, but just because she's still dealing with this shit. Because it also touches on throughout the movie, it splices back to her demons, no pun intended, but her issues that led to the career derailment, and that she had, had to have this back surgery, and as well as this because of, her stomach being cut just like wide open from basically getting in a fight with her boyfriend while they were both all drugged up and driving basically their truck off a cliff, which is totally insane. But she has all this, issues when it comes to her physical body because of that. But yeah, so she is at his house to get more, pills. And that's when he kind of goes crazy and she witnesses his self-harming to attach the entity to her. And then ultimately, The story plays out as you would expect, but it's just very, very cool the way it does. It's this psychotic, paranoid, hallucinogenic situation where she can't tell right from wrong, real from fake, and then also ultimately realizing that a lot of the deaths that are happening around her are being caused by herself because she doesn't know what she's doing. It's almost kind of like that blackout feel when you totally do something, but you have absolutely no memory of it until one, either somebody shows you video footage of it happening, or you literally come back to life, so to speak, no pun intended, but with the blood on your hands.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a cool thing about, like I said, with this movie and even with the other one where this the entity that goes into you, he fucks with you for a little while. I mean, they give you, I think it's, I can't remember how many days it is until you actually, till, he basically is like, okay, I'm done with you. And,
I think they said
makes
it
you
was like a week.
yeah, or something like that, where you off yourself. But throughout the whole entire time, it fucks with you. It makes you see things. It makes you think things are going. And that's what's crazy. That's what about this, especially with with the story and the premises of her, having a drug problem and stuff like that. Now she's on the clean. Now she's clean, and she more than likely is clean. And everybody sees her freaking out all the time, seeing this, saying that, that her label and her management and everybody who works around her is thinking that she's basically on drugs again, and
Yeah.
no one believing her that she's seeing all this bad shit, which that's what ultimately this entity, that's what it feeds on, because most people are not going to believe, you see you this and I say all this and this happened and this happened, and they're like, no, I was in the bathroom with you, man. There was nobody doing anything stupid. There wasn't this lady here eating bugs or something like that. What are you talking about, man? You're on the drugs again? And like, you're trying to tell them, I'm not on any drugs. Like, yeah, sure, you're seeing a girl, slice her mouth open or cut her tongue off or something like that. And that's why I like where it does that. Especially like I said, in her profession, with her going crazy and stuff like that, and her being this big huge pop musician and stuff like that. She's got a lot of like already stress anyway, because she's trying to make a comeback, and this is like her basically, she got that chance to kind of come back after she got into that wreck, because her boyfriend was like a huge actor at the time, I guess. So it's like, with that, and then like her going to rehab, and then her going to physical therapy. So basically the world was like, okay, yeah, well, we're gonna give this, this musician a chance. And now it's like, she knows that, like, you only have one shot to do this. And that was like, it was perfect. I thought it was really, really cool. I liked it. Like I said, I like the fact that it's singular on just her and her problems, you know what I mean? Versus like I said, the first movie, even though it really, even though the entity really wasn't on a lot of people, you saw a lot more stuff. You saw other people who might have had it too, where there's another entity, or she might see stuff, and it's a lot more sporadic. Where this one was a little bit more like kind of tunnel vision, where you're just going straight, straight arrow. You're gonna see all this kind of stuff, and I thought it was really cool. And getting towards the end of the movie, or just like in the meat of the movie and stuff like that, when people are dying, things are all happening, and you never really know. Like I said, even when you're watching this movie, you really never know if it's really happening or is you just seeing it. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe, yeah, I don't think it really is. And then all of a sudden, boom, like, she ends up like killing her, her main agent is her mother. And, she sees this and she thinks it's all like fake and stuff like that. When she actually, stabbed her mom in the eye. And then it's a lot of crazy shit in this movie. I thought it was pretty cool though, with that
Yeah.
whole like delusional kind of stuff.
No, for sure. And ultimately, like you said, the entity, fucking with you and making you do this kind of stuff, and, kind of turns her into this, like, medical, like, insane asylum protected kind of murderer. But then she, from these things that she's doing, but then she, she like breaks out because she also was like sort of being aided at one point by like the brother of a old victim that was like, well, I didn't believe even though all the signs were there, and I kept getting told by my brother over and over and over again that this was a thing, I chose not to listen. And then the worst happened, and he turned out to be right the whole time. So there's sort of this person trying to help, but ultimately that just leads to nothing and just more bloodshed. And the crazy thing too with this movie, when you get to like the end of it, because you and I discussed this right after we got done watching the movie, is the curiosities behind, is there going to be a Smile 3? So the thing is, and without going too in depth of too spoilage, but I kind of have to say a certain amount or it can't really discuss the topic, is like we've already discussed, the entity feeds off the death of somebody in front of somebody else. Well, the bottom line is, the death of our main character happened in front of a lot of people. So now there's the curiosity that I kind of had that you and I talked about, where there's like, is it worth doing a third movie? Because is it believable to do a third movie? Or it'd be kind of interesting to do a third movie, because now instead of typically having just one smile victim just moving itself along, you now potentially just have a world of entities, like a city filled with possessed entities because of what happened at the end of the movie. And I'm very curious as to, will they do it? Do they do it? And is it worth doing? Because I could see both sides of the argument.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think it could be done in two ways. If I would do it, if I was gonna make Smile 3, I would either go like how 1 goes right into 2, 2 goes right into 3, and it's just fucking. You start off with no really explanation because you already kind of know what's happening, but just everybody just fucking offing themselves, and then just more people offing themselves. Or you can do it kind of like months and months and months later. Now it's more like the world's like an apocalyptic kind of world, because everybody's kind of, since you had 10,000 people or 50,000 people at that concert, those 50,000 people affect another 50,000 people, and those 50 people thousand. So you can make it where it's months or years later, where now there's only X amount of people and everybody's trying to stay away from another person, because if they see another person, it might be an infected person. Everybody kind of knows about this entity, this Smile entity now. So maybe it's something like that where you're kind of
everywhere they look. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was cool. And another part of this movie that I really, really dug that was kind of cool was, like you were saying, when she was, at this throughout this movie, she's fighting all her demons, and apparently she did some fucked up shit with a friend of hers, and she was trying to text back, and you find out that the girl forgave her and all this stuff like that. So you go like, okay, she breaks out of the Salem asylum, and the girl happens to be there, and she's like, hey, we need to go, and she goes and she starts driving, and then all of a sudden you realize that person was never really, her friend never really reconnected with her, that it was always the entity, and she was actually driving the whole entire time. And then like you said, you see the girl at one point, and she's like, why do you keep texting me all the time? We're done. I haven't. And she was like, what? And that's when you find out. Yeah, it was kind of like a Fight Club moment. That's what reminded me of. I thought that was a kind of cool moment where it was like, you're like, oh shit, like, how's this? Because when you kind of get these little subtle notes while the entity is driving and she's the passenger, and you're just like, wait, the entity is driving, then how the fuck is she? Who's driving then? Because the entity's not really real. I mean, as far as like physically there. So you're like that, and then all of a sudden you see that she was the person that was driving the whole time. You're like, oh, they pulled a Fight Club.
Yeah, it's definitely got that whole Fight Club of Marla with Tyler, but it was always Marla with Edward Norton's character, but that's because Edward Norton was always Tyler and Brad
Yeah.
Pitt was never a thing. But it also has a little bit for horror fans and people that have watched our show. It also had a little bit of hot tension to it as well.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to like the driving scene, which I thought was very, very fun. But yeah, man, overall, Smile 2 is a cool one, man. I definitely enjoyed the movie. Enjoyed it quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I heard a lot of people, which is a lot of people like that I saw that talked about Smile 2. They liked it a lot better than Smile 1. And the people that said that they liked Smile 2 better than Smile 1 didn't like Smile 1. They thought it was, I know so many people that are like, dude, this movie was horrible, sucked, I didn't like it. And then they liked the second one. And I was like, I don't understand why, if you like the second one, I don't understand why you wouldn't like the first one, because it's very similar. Like I said, the only difference is the Smile 2 is more singular. It's more one kind of just one path where it's one person with this versus like all the other crazy stuff that's going around in the first movie. But yeah, I
Well,
mean,
'cause in the first movie too, they have to they have to teach you what the
oh
entity.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, to me, I like both. I think they both are just as good as the other one. So like I said, you know, if you're gonna rate them or talk about which one you like better, I think like I said, I think they both are kind of right there together. I think they're very very even. And like I said, it's one of those rare movies that you kind of need the first one to
Yeah.
like the second one, because like I said, since it's such a good, it's the story, not even just the storyline and knowing about the entity and all that, but it's just because the characters from the first one blend into the second movie. So it's, if you hadn't watched the first movie, you're in the very beginning, you're not going to understand any of the stuff that's going on. You could still enjoy Smile 2 without seeing Smile 1, but it makes it a little bit easier because then you can understand what's going on in their head with the entity and how it works and how it does with people.
No, definitely, brother. And that's the thing with me. You're definitely right. The two movies are definitely on like an even plane and stuff like that. But I mean, like for me, I gotta put Smile 1 a little bit higher than Smile 2, simply because like I think the education on what the entity is kind of needed. Again, you can definitely enjoy Smile 2, like we were trying to see the movie with Mrs. Vamp and we just couldn't really, get it to happen. And she was sort of reserved on the whole, like, yeah, but I haven't seen the first one. And I'm like, babe, like it's in the other room on the shelf. I can show you the first one. But, had she seen it with us, I think she still would have enjoyed it overall. But I do personally think that if you're gonna watch it, the education that the first one will give you, it's better to have it than not have it. So overall, again, I think it's a great movie. I think it's really, really enjoyable. My personal suggestion to all the Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls that are watching is see the first one first, because I just think it's worth knowing a little bit more about the entity. So then when all the crazy stuff continues and some of the slightly different directions that it goes in this movie, it makes sense that the entity would have that power and could make a person do this or go there. And I think it's better to have that knowledge than not have it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think, like I said, yeah. To me, I've always been the person who always goes like, when you go see like, Scream 3 or something like that, and you're like, or part 4 or something ridiculously even that far, where you're 3 and 4 and you're like going with somebody and they're like, well, I've never seen 1 and 2, 3. I'm like, well, why the fuck are you going to see 4? Like, it'd be different, for some movies you can kind of do it, where you can, movies that really aren't continuations really, but some movies are like, some movies like this, it's a complete continuation, so you really need it, where like, some, like I said, some horror movies, even though part 1s and part 2s and part 3s and 4s and all that are, are sort of somewhat separate movies, so you can kind of get away with it sometimes, but it's,
Yeah.
other times I'm just like, yeah, I never understood, like, to me, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go see, part 3 before I see 1 or 2 or something like that. It's like, really?
Exactly. Like you could watch Witchboard 2 without watching Witchboard 1. It's a similar concept, but its own kind of thing. I think that the Omen movies are also very similar to that. You know, you can watch any Omen movie kind of at any time. Whether or not the movie's good per se is up to interpretation, of course, because as history typically shows, the longer a franchise goes, kind of the weaker the movies get. But the point is, like, the Omens also are like, they're their own kind of movies with the same basic, you know, concept. So, like, yeah, there's definitely stuff out there. And do I think that Smile 2 falls in that category? Yeah, I guess. Because, again, when you have that guy that they do have in Smile 2 that, you know, finds her and is working with her and kind of educating her based on his personal experience, it kind of helps for someone who didn't see the first movie. It helps them to kind of understand a little bit more about what's going on. So could you see the movie blind by itself and enjoy it? Absolutely. 100% I think you can. But is it worth it to see the first movie? Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny because you like, you know, we were talking about that with Witchboard and stuff like that. Yeah, you can watch those three, and then the movie that we paired it with, Poltergeist, you do not want to watch Poltergeist 3 before you see 1 or 2, because you're gonna be like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is this young girl doing this? Why is all this stuff like that? Yeah, you definitely want to watch those in, you know, in order. You know what I mean? Versus, like you said, Witchboard 1, 2, and 3, you could pop in 3, then 1, then 2, or you can just watch 2 and 1 and throw away 3 anyway. But whatever.
Exactly. Please don't watch 3 before 1 and 2, because
don't watch 3 first.
you'll never watch 1 and 2, and they're epically better than the third one. So Fangs, Infernos, Ghouls, please, if you haven't seen our episode or have not seen Witchboards yet and want to, please don't watch the third one first, because you won't watch the next 2, and they're so much better.
But then again, you have on the other side of that, you know, I'm not a fan of the almost said Insidious fan, the Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity, yeah.
Yeah, I watched that first one, thought it was garbage. A lot of people were like, but I heard like the third one or something like that, it gets better. But because the fact that I watched that first one, so in that one, that one I probably would have been better off watching Paranormal 3, and then going like, okay, this is pretty cool, and then watch 1 and be like, what the hell? Because then I would, at least if I would have watched one of those other ones that were good, and then watched the one that was bad, I might watch the other ones just because, okay, maybe they are good or bad. But if you start off with, like you said, if you start off with Witchboard 3, which is bad, or in my opinion, Paranormal Activity 1 bad, it's like, you're like, fuck this franchise, I ain't watching any more of these.
Dude, that happened to me with Texas Chainsaw, bro, because like when I was a young little vamp dude and I started like wandering out to like Blockbuster and started getting into like horror movie franchises and stuff like that, I really truly don't know how it happened. I don't remember how it happened. Maybe this movie was available, but other movies weren't or whatever. But one of the the first movie I actually ever saw for Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like the fourth one, The Next Generation, this train wreck of a movie with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. And it was so scarring. Not like scary, like, oh my God, I can't take it. I was shocked at how bad it was. And it actually stopped me from watching these great Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Of course, the first is just classic. And then the second one, we both love that second one, man, with Bill Moseley's Chop Top character. But man, did it take me a while, and I mean a while, to actually watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, because I was so just shockingly like turned off from that because of that Next Generation movie, that I was like, these guys are not worthy of my time. These movies are not worthy of my time. To then realize that all I did was, you know, is be a little bit of a detriment to myself. Because then when I did watch those movies, I was like, these are fantastic. What the fuck happened there?
Yeah, that's what you get for start with 4.
Absolutely, for sure. But ultimately, my friend, yeah, Smile 2, what do you say, man? That was a pretty enjoyable experience, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Like I said, I liked it. I thought it was cool. You know, you know, glad that the Fangs and the Ghouls and all the Infernos decided to pick that one, because that one was a fun one to watch. So, And like I said, at the time even at the time we were doing the poll for this, it was still really new. And even with the five movies we're talking about, Smile 2 is the newest out of all those movies. I mean, Terrifier 3 is new too, but that still came out a little bit before, like a month before Smile 2. So Smile 2 is like that brand new fresh one that it was like we even put it on our poll for 2024 best horror movie even without even the movie even being out yet. We were
Yeah.
like, oh, we're gonna put that in our poll because we liked Smile 1, so we're like, oh, we'll put it out there as a, if the Fangs and all that want to pick that as a movie to watch. And of course, some of them that have seen it was like, yeah, dude, man, you guys need to talk about that because part 2 was killer. And I agree. I thought it was a good sequel. When it comes to sequels not always being as good or being horrible than their predecessors, I think that, like I said, I think those were pretty even. Like I said, I agree with you. I think I give one just that slight edge because, like you said, the Education Plus, it's the OG original, kind of one, but it's very slightly, just a little bump.
Absolutely, for sure. Because it's kind of one of those things where even Inferno person on the lawn, you'd be kind of like, wait, huh? Why? Okay, fine, cool, but why? But yeah, ultimately, man, definitely a cool one.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple couple of those, haha, with the Summertime Suicide, and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the teen, you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampireanddevil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
And as we continue on with 2024, let's get back into another movie that had a lot of hype behind it, a lot of attention behind it, stars people that we really like. And I love the idea of the main villain and protagonist about this movie. And let's do a little talking about Longlegs, my friend. Now, here's the one thing, though, that I actually do feel a little obligated to let the Fangs and Infernos know when it comes to Longlegs. And by no means is this a bad thing. I thought this movie was really cool. I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I liked the concept of it quite a bit. But I gotta say, man, this is easily one of the most carbon examples of where I feel that all the taglines, the quotes, the review quotes and stuff of this movie were very wrong. And I really think for all you Fangs and Infernos and Ghouls out there, if you haven't done a lot of research or review reading or tagline quotes for Longlegs and you want to see it, then just don't. As in, not don't see the movie. Please go and see the movie. Don't read taglines. Don't look at things. Go in as blind as possible. I really did feel that this movie was I do feel that all of the fans were lied to with a lot of these taglines when it came to scariest movie of the year and blah, 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 and yada, yada, yada. I think for what it's worth, they should have kept this incredibly simple. If you love, crime, serial killer, thriller movies, this one's for you. I think it should have been left something more like that. But anyway, that is simply my suggestion to all you Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls out there. Don't read into the hype on this one. This movie is quite exceptional. We're going to break it down right now. But when it came to the reviews and the taglines, I do think they lied to you. I think you're going to leave disappointed if you think that's what you're getting. But anyway, dude, Nicolas Cage is a serial killer, bro. I mean, I think it's also safe to say that Nicolas Cage has also gotten to a point where they could even use just him as a tagline. Nicolas Cage plays this or that or these. And people would go just because they would automatically start putting together a mental image of what they think Nicolas Cage would do as that character. But dude, Longlegs overall, very, very cool. And no shock to anybody, definitely gave me that Silence of the Lambs feel.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing, like you were saying with the taglines about this horror and this and stuff like that. To me, it was like if you were into movies like Silence of the Lambs, it definitely has a very Silence of the Lambs feel, especially in the very beginning. This girl, the main actress in the movie is, going through that FBI kind of thing, and she's going through, going to the house and trying to find this killer and stuff like that. So it definitely has a very Silence of the Lambs feel to it, especially in the beginning. And then, kind of mix it in with a little bit of X-Files maybe or something like that is a good way, because it's got a little bit of like you said, it's got that supernatural sort of aspect to it as well. And then like you said, and then with the serial killer and crime and actions kind of stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, just a crazy, I mean, the beginning, this movie, when you thought you have seen the craziness of Nicolas Cage in all the movies that he's been in, you're not prepared to see Nicolas Cage the way you're gonna see Nicolas Cage in this movie. I think he played it really well.
Yeah.
He talked about, this was the first time and more than likely the last time he'll ever play someone who's like a real, even though this isn't based off of a real serial killer, but just that basis of a real serial killer. He just, I mean, you know him. He goes full into his characters,
He
and he
does.
just said that like a lot of it was just, especially because this has to do with a lot of children. I mean, it's this guy is a child killer, or child serial killer, aspect in this movie. So it's very, it's got that kind of darkness of like getting your, Nicolas Cage getting in the mindset of somebody that would try to harm and do things to kids. So I can see like where he was like, yeah, this is pretty fucked up stuff.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I definitely agree with you on that. But it's a cool concept. It is a slow burn movie. But the thing I also like about this movie though is it's a slow burn movie, but for all the right reasons, which usually is very tricky to do. We're going to talk about the slow burn a little bit in our next movie as well, because you and I actually talked about that in person when we got done watching it. But I like the concept of this one because I think also to the common populace, even a movie like Silence of the Lambs has that slow burn feel to it, where you're figuring everything out and does this make sense or does it not make sense? But anyway, I really did like Nicolas Cage's portrayal of this. Yeah, there's a little part of me that's saddened to hear that he doesn't see himself playing another type of sinister character like that, based off a real type of person. But at the same time, time will tell and money talks. And I also think that the niche that Nick has carved does kind of allow for certain opportunities. Because look, it's very well documented that because of poor choices in his youth, a lot of him showing up in so many crazy movies, whether it was good or bad, was to bring back some of the finances and fix some woes. But I love the stuff he's carved out. I think it's so cool. It's very Nick, and he has a way of, like you said, going all into those. I love Mandy. We've talked about that movie ourselves before, and twinsied up at times when it came to that. Love that movie. I love, Willy's Wonderland, where he goes the entire movie without saying a single word, with I think the only like vocal thing he does is like a grunt, like 80% into the movie, and doesn't speak for the entire movie. But then you have a movie like this, which, is again it takes a toll, I can imagine, because also he goes all in. He probably did a certain amount of research that probably involved a lot of stuff about, Bundy, Dahmer, Manson, all that kind of stuff. But overall, I think it was really, really cool. I loved the portrayal. There's a couple of times that you get your trademark just nicking out, where it's like, man, here's a couple of times where he just went to he went to 11, that, I still juggle a little bit on whether or not I feel he really needed to go to 11 for it, but it's so Nick, and you just kind of know. Can anybody really say that like all they needed to know about the movie Renfield was anything other than, dude, Nick Cage is playing Dracula? It's kind of all you needed for that movie. And that's kind of the reputation he's carved for himself. But I'm for the ride, man. I like that style of acting. When you just commit, you have a style, it's your way, and people they know what you're going to get. But then it's still a matter of like, how can you still kind of fuck with them?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely in his portrayal in this movie is very creepy.
Yeah.
Just his look. He's like albino-y. He's just like he just seems like one of those guys who was like, stranger danger kind of like thing, where he's just like, hey, little kitty, would you like a balloon? And he just talks like this, and he's so eccentric and stuff like that. And then like throughout this whole entire movie, because like in the movie, he's this serial killer that they're trying to find, and this this woman is being able, she's got like this kind of sixth sense about her, where she can feel things, and she knows things that are going to happen that happen, or she can, she knows where the one killer is in the house, and they're checking houses and stuff like that, and she's like, first house, she's like, yeah, this is the house he's in, and all of a sudden he was in that house. So she has got like this sixth sense kind of to her, and eventually they get Long Legs, and yeah, they get him in the in the detective room and stuff like that, the interrogating room. And
Interrogation.
he's just interrogating room, and he's just like, where's she at? Where's my pretty little girl? And then he decides to bash the fucking shit out of himself, and it's crazy, like that portrayal to me. I've like I said, Nick has done some crazy shit in his career, but I think this is like the most insane role he had. But like I said, but even with that though, like I said, he's such a predominant person in this movie. But then you find out he's really kind of a side character in this movie,
Yeah.
to be completely honest. Because as they're going on and they're continuing on the investigation and trying to figure out what's going on, because all these, these what the premise of this movie was is these girls are turning, I think, 11 or 13 or something like that. It's always their certain birthday, and when they turn a certain age, they come and they might have been younger. I think it might have been 7 or 8 or something like that. But I don't remember whatever age they were in this movie. They come and get them, and then the family goes crazy, and like someone in the house kills themselves, kills the whole entire family. So it's all this like really crazy shit that's going on, and you're trying to figure out what's going on with this movie, and it's like it's all over the place for a little bit. It's like, oh my god, what the hell's going on? Then eventually you figure out, like you said, you figure out this girl can know stuff, and she figures it out, and she's part of it, and her mother's part of it, and you find out her mother's like completely insane, and then the mom goes into a realm where you find out she's kind of a co-conspirator
Yeah.
of this entity that you don't really find out about, but this entity that can control people, and they put this little silver phantasm ball in the freaking dummy head. There's a lot spoilers on this. There's a lot of crazy shit in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain exactly what all happens in this movie, because it goes from your, like you said, a normal, we're going to try to find out serial killer, Silence of the Lambs 7 kind of movie, all of a
Yeah.
sudden into some weird ass science fiction devil demonic pinball kind of shit. It's weird.
It really is. And the funny thing is, I actually love the way you brought that up, where you kind of find out that he's a secondary character, because the other thing, especially about this, like a mental frame of mind, trying to learn, trying to pick this person's brain, it reminds me a lot about a movie that you and I watched together, Nefarious, a while back, where, yeah, Sean Patrick Flannery's character is nefarious. He's the kind of the main guy, but that's up for debate, because like the guy that's interrogating him, that he's basically predicting all these things to make this guy go crazy, is kind of the main guy, because it's like, he's the protagonist, he's the evil entity that's making, this officer or doctor guy just kind of slowly go insane and become no different than him. So it's a very interesting thing with that. But the other thing that's also kind of cool about this situation with this movie and Longlegs is that you mentioned like the whole, like, do you want a balloon kind of thing, that kind of creepy feel, that creeper kind of character is very reminiscent of the creeper from a movie, The Black Phone, that we love, is great, absolutely adore that movie and looking forward to the next one they're putting out. But the reason I also go that direction is the cool thing about Black Phone is it's based off the novel of Joe Hill, who is the offspring of someone quite famous. And the director of this movie also happens to be the offspring of someone who's quite famous.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy when it comes down to, to when with the genes of these like famous, writers and famous directors and stuff like that. That's crazy with these offsprings of these, famous directors, famous actors, like you said, with the Black Phone and Joe Hill, and everybody who knows who who Joe Hill is, he's the son of Stephen King, with great movies like he did the Black Phone, the Horns with Daniel Radcliffe in it. But the cool thing about this one is it kind of brings back the whole, creepiness, maybe a little psychotic, maybe a little bit of killer, maybe a little psycho with some Anthony Perkins, main guy from Psycho, Norman Bates. This is his son directing this movie. So it's kind of like, that full circle, like, with Anthony Perkins, I was a huge fan of his. I was
Yeah.
always a huge fan of his movies, beyond just the Psycho. But you know, obviously he is Norman Bates. You know, he is the iconic, you know, killer of motels, hotels, and Holiday Inns.
No, absolutely. And Anthony's absolutely great, and the one thing I also love about, you know, Anthony Perkins when it comes to Psycho, because of course Psycho is Psycho. It's the gold standard. It's so fantastic. But he's the, Norman Bates. He's really the only Norman Bates. And don't get me wrong, of course I'm aware of Vince Vaughn. Of course I'm aware of the Bates Motel show. But my point is when it came to the specific Psycho franchise, they did 4 movies in that franchise that a lot of people probably don't even know about. They might be aware that there's a second one. They might casually have heard that there's a third. I rarely have ever come across somebody who's aware that there's a 4th movie. And the fact that Anthony Perkins was Norman Bates for all of those movies. Yes, they had to do some coaxing when it came to getting him involved, make sure the script was going to be good enough for him. But I love the fact that, when it comes to the specific Psycho franchise, you only have one Norman Bates played by Anthony Perkins, which I think is super duper cool. But yeah, man, you're right. I mean, I think it's a really cool thing that Osgood Perkins did with this movie. He's also coming off Gretel and Hansel, which is definitely, wacky and weird and all that kind of stuff. And, I think that movie's super cool. Like I love, the witch character and all that kind of stuff for all of that, and had a lot of fun with that character for sure. But I love also seeing when you have somebody who not only has grown up with that mindset due to the fact that their parent is this way or has this style, but finds their own niche in it. And that's what I also think is really cool, because yeah, you can't deny the little tidbits that Osgood throws out that are probably in his DNA, of course, because of that certain situation. But he still finds a really great way to make it on his own. It's very similar to those 2 recent Ghostbusters movies, taking taking into consideration, yes, we've got the all-female cast Ghostbusters where, they tried, but when they really dialed it in to do a proper Ghostbusters movie, now 2 movies that matter and match. It was Ivan Reitman's son, the director of the first 2 Ghostbusters, who knew what to do, how to design it, and how to execute. So that's one thing I really love about Osgood's, the way it appears is he seems to really get it, and he understands a lot about it. And the thing I also love so much about this movie that I think is one of the best way to talk about this movie is how it scares you, because fear and being scared is going to be different to whoever it is that watches a movie. But the one thing I really like about this movie that I think is very safe to say when it comes to the fear conversation is it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the movie, yeah, it has a real weird feel to it. Cause like you said, when you find out some of the information in this movie, and you're going on, and you're getting towards the end of the movie, and like you said, you find out that the mother was helping along, and what it was basically she kind of made a pact with what would be considered myself, maybe the devil, or some kind of demon, entity. And basically it was that he'll leave her daughter alone, as long as she goes out and continues going on. And that's when you find out that she was the one that was going out delivering these dolls to these families, and that they were the ones who, the families that, like I said, it drove this entity that was inside these dolls was basically like forcing these family members, usually the father, to basically go crazy and kill his family and kill himself and stuff like that. And it was kind of like, it was really, really cool. I liked it. Like I said, it gets really wacky at the end, like I said, a little bit, but I like it. It was like the subtleness of it, where it was a little too, not too crazy, but you're kind of like, okay, this is where this movie is gonna go. It kind of, you weren't kind of, like I said, you weren't kind of expecting it. You know, the way that it started off, it seemed like it was, like you said, it's just your seven, your Silence of the Lambs, your, you know, straight up like, you know, killer thriller movie, you know, stuff like
Yeah.
that. But then it kind of just takes that right turn a little bit. And like I said, overall, like I said, I dug it. Like I said, I mean, to me, I mean, like I said, storyline, I think it's cool. I think it's an original, you know, it's an original story, you know, mixed in with stuff that's, you know, obviously other things have happened. It's not the first time anybody's ever, you know, gone on a killing spree and killing kids and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. So, you know, it's definitely stuff that, you know, has happened in the real world, but all together is just mixed in. I think it was a very original idea. I liked all the characters that are in the movie. You know, I liked all the actors and the actresses and stuff like that. I mean, of course, I mean, personally, I think Nicolas Cage stole the movie. His you know, his portrayal in this movie is basically the thing to watch. You know, it's just such an odd role for him, but he just like takes it and just makes it his own. And you can, and like I said, it's just, to me, I think it's just one of the cool movies. And I love the fact, you know, this is a guy, you know, going back, and you know, I know we're plugging a lot of smoke up of Nick Cage's butthole in this episode, but that's the thing about, you know, Nicolas Cage. I mean, you got to realize this dude, you know, started off as like, you know, backup actor, you know, in like, you know, these 80s rom-com movies and stuff like that. And then, you know, kind of became a leading man, then became like huge, you know, you got like Con Air,
Yeah.
and you got like, you know, the Gone in 60 Seconds and the National, you know, Treasure movies and all these things. He's a huge actor. And, you know, then, you know, just like other actors, you know, you kind of lose a little muster and stuff like that. I love the fact that he's like down to do these kind of dirtier and grittier movies, like
Yeah.
you were saying, like Mandy and all these weird. I mean, he did a movie called Pig that's really weird. You know, I
He
love
did
the fact that
Vampire's Kiss, which is so bizarre.
yeah. So I like the fact that he's just like he's an A-list actor. I would consider him an A-list actor, even though maybe not as much nowadays, but I still would always consider him an A-list actor. And the fact that he's willing to do these kind of movies that are more for your up and coming actors who are kind of new, that don't mind. But usually once you get to that level like he's at, most people are going to be like, no. And prime example of that was when Rob Zombie was doing his SS Woman of the S, when he was making that fake trailer.
Yeah.
he was like he was like, ah, man, you wouldn't want to be in this movie. He's like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And they freaking put him as Fu Manchu. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Werewolves of
so
the SS.
yeah, well, you know, when they did that trailer, so it's like, it's to the point where, yeah, you know, like I said, Nicolas Cage is just like, fuck yeah, man. If it's a cool movie, you know, got a cool, you know, cool storyline. You know, he's like, yeah, he's down for it. And I like that, you know what I mean? Because he just seems, you know, in Hollywood with the kind of actors that, you know, that it would be the pedigree that he's at, would usually shine down on it, which,
Yeah.
like, a prime example of that we've talked about before. And we even talked a little bit about it in the previous episode for this 2024, was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 that you were talking
Yes.
about with Renee Zellweger and, you know, and Matthew
Matthew McConaughey.
McConaughey, where you know, this movie was made years and years before, but it took so long for them to bring it out, and then it got even more side him because Renee Zellweger didn't want the movie to come out, because at that time she just did like Legally Blonde or some big movie that she just did. She became huge, and she
I
didn't
think it
want
was the Me, Myself, and Irene. I think it was around that time.
it was one of those ones. It was, you know, she started becoming this big actress and thought that, oh shit, I don't want anybody to see this movie now because it's gonna ruin my career. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, like I said, so for Nicolas Cage to be like, you know what, I'm in the part of my career right now where, yeah, I can make, you know, big huge blockbuster movies like Con Air and National Treasure and all that, but I can also do these crazy independent horror films and, you know, weird films like that too, and have fun just making those too.
Absolutely. You know, shout out to Tony Todd. Love The Rock.
Yeah.
Big fan of The Rock. Love that movie for Nicolas Cage. And also a little shout out to Snake Eyes too. I enjoyed that one quite a
Oh,
bit.
yeah, I'm a huge Nicolas Cage fan.
Same.
So to
Yeah.
me, like, you know, even some of the bad movies that he's in are still fun to me. You know what I mean? Like, Raising Arizona and all that other crazy stuff that he's been in. Like you said,
Raising
Vampires too.
Arizona, Mom and Dad. Like,
Yeah. So yeah,
so
so the yeah, so those kind of movies, and you're gonna get those ones. But yeah, I love the fact that he's just like, whatever, man, bring on the weirdness, man. I'll do it, and he just takes full charge for it.
for sure. And one more like kind of final thought for myself when it comes to this is like, you know, the one also suggestion too that I would suggest to the Fangs as well when it comes to this movie is I really do feel because I look forward to revisiting this movie soon actually is that this movie hit me very similar to Frailty. I feel I need multiple opportunities to watch this movie. Like I didn't I didn't love the ending, and it's not that the ending was bad. It's just there's always that saying, leave them wanting more, which hey, look, I'm a big fan of leave them wanting more. But in the concept of a movie that I can't guarantee another one is coming, sometimes I don't get down with leave them wanting more because I'm left without my answers. And sometimes that's kind of like weird for me. And sometimes I struggle a little bit in certain like horror movies where I'm like, yeah, but it's not that I don't mind coming to my own conclusions. I love going to my own conclusions. But sometimes when I still feel like I was left without the tools I need to get the job done is sometimes a little like frustrating to me. And I don't think that this movie did that per se, but I did feel that it left a little bit. I feel like they made it a little bit more difficult than it needed to be for people to kind of figure things out. And like Frailty, we had an episode involving Frailty for Father's Day, and it's such a fantastic movie, but that is damn sure a movie that I had to watch a couple of times just to figure out like this son being that, or how the dad was in here and doing this, and what time frame are they working on. I do feel that Longlegs is that same kind of thing. I think it really benefits making people taking the time to watch it a couple of times to really get a grip on it, really kind of grasp the concept of it. And I'm not talking about just watch it 3 times in a row or 3 times that week or even 3 times that month, but like it's probably going to take a couple of times. If you watch it 3 times in 8 months, you'll probably get what you need out of it without feeling that you like are being forced to watch this thing endlessly to where it burns itself out. I just think that but I do think you need more opportunities to watch this movie to really catch things that you missed, but also kind of understand certain places they were going.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those ones where you have to it's that intellectual kind of horror where you have to pay attention to a lot of things. And even after I watched it once and then watched it again, and there were little things that I missed. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I didn't even pay attention to that part. Oh yeah, why that? Oh yeah, that kind of explains something too. So yeah, it's one. I mean, even watching movies now, like I mean, we've talked about this movie being Silence of the Lambs and Seven. I mean, I watched Seven not that long ago, and there was parts of that where it's like you notice things like, oh yeah, I didn't even notice that part, and so you kind of get that when you for this kind of movie, you need that. You definitely and like I said, you need to watch it, and it's not a movie where I don't personally feel like it's a movie that, even though you're gotta watch it a bunch of times, that doesn't like make it any worse, and
Yeah.
it doesn't like make it where it's like, oh, I gotta watch this again. Like it's got a watchability to it where you're like, oh, I could pop that in again. Yeah, let me watch it this time. Maybe this time instead of like, you know, playing on my phone while I'm watching it or eating or something like that, maybe I'll pay a little more attention to see if I can get all the little things that I missed. So yeah, it's definitely a fun movie to watch, and I feel like yeah, Fangs. Like I said, if it's one of those movies where I feel like you may not like it. You may like it your first time watching it. You may just love it just because of Nicolas Cage parts. But, give it a couple times. Maybe it's gone one of those ways. So,
No, I'm definitely with you on that, man. So coming off of this movie, which, is a relatively unique concept. Obviously, it dabbles in concepts that preceded it, but overall, it's kind of its own thing. Let's transition into a movie that's absolutely not its own thing, which is totally fine. And let's talk a little bit about Salem's Lot. You and I literally just watched this together, and it was a lot of fun. And I love Salem's Lot in general, but it's very interesting because the original movie is 3 hours long. It was a two-part miniseries. The second movie, Return to Salem's Lot, had some length to it as well at about an hour and 40 minutes. And then you also had a retelling, remake, reimagining, however you want to do it, of the miniseries, another two-part miniseries, actually starring Rob Lowe. This, however, is HBO Max's interpretation as a one-time movie, like the sequel was. But this isn't a miniseries. It's not broken up. It's not ridiculously long. It runs at about 2, and it's the remake of Salem's Lot, which had some really cool actors and actresses in it. If people are a big fan of death, they'll they'll play their air guitars when they realize that William Sadler's in this movie. But obviously, classic vampire movie based off Stephen King. And overall, I like this movie a lot, man. I really enjoyed it. I was very stoked that the Fangs and Infernos voted it as something they wanted us to talk about to wrap up 2024. And it was just super duper cool. I liked the look of Barlow. Very classic, exactly what I wanted. If you're really going to kind of try to duplicate the first movie, I have certain expectations of what, as a vampire guy, as what I'm going to need out of you. And I really did enjoy the look of Barlow, the style. I like the way it was shot. But yeah, man, and overall, I enjoyed the concept quite a bit. I thought it was really, really cool. Basically, a writer goes back to town looking for inspiration, doing research on his past. He's originally from the town of Jerusalem's Lot, referred to as Salem's Lot, and then, meets basically his love interest of the movie. And then little by little, based off what, a lot of people would call his familiar, basically Barlow, his henchman, his helper, the guy who brings him people to feed on, is what's allowing Barlow to turn Salem's Lot into basically a town full of vampires.
Yeah. To me, I like it's like you said, like the original being 3 hours long, and this movie, even though it's a remake slash retelling. Yes, there's some things that they do a little bit differently in this movie versus what they did in the original one. They changed things around here and a little bit there. But that's the cool thing about this was like, yeah, I feel like they took out all that extra trimming of shit you didn't really need from the original, and kind of like 2 hours is perfectly for what they needed in this movie.
Yeah.
It got to where it was. It explained in the beginning. Boom. It was like very linear film. You know what I mean? It went A to B exactly how you would want a movie would be. Where you didn't need all this extra stuff. You didn't need to know about all this other stupid shit that doesn't have to do with the movie or whatnot. But yeah, to me, like I said, and like remakes, like I said, they could have gone two of each ways. Like I said, the original Barlow, and the original one's very Nosferatu type vampire. And
Yeah.
then when they remade Salem's Lot, they kept that same Return to Salem's Lot. They kept that same look for them. And then in the remake with 2004, I think, or whatever it was, the Rob Lowe one, obviously that one was a little bit different because they made Rutger Hauer the Barlow, and he was a human character. You saw him in his human form throughout the movie. So I like the fact that they did it, more of like the old school way where he was just straight up Nosferatu vampire the whole entire time. You know what I mean? There
Yeah.
was no, you didn't need to transform. But like I said, I mean, the storyline is basically almost exactly, like you said, it's exactly the same. Guy comes into town, things like that, love interest. Some kids get, kidnapped and turned, obviously, you have the scene, which I thought was really cool. I love the fact that their eyes are glowing like the original one. You have the kid coming to the other kid's house and let me in your window. It's like, no, man, you're flying, you son of a bitch, get out of
Kind of
here.
that Buffy the Vampire, like David Arquette scene.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just to me, it was like, exactly. I mean, like I said, there were definitely, when it gets towards the middle end of start going, you're getting towards the end of this movie. Yes, it does play a little bit differently than the original one. This one that's where it kind of once it gets into once you get into the basic of him taking over this town, and the characters doing this and all that kind of stuff like that. Yeah, it definitely then it kind of goes, hey, we're gonna go a little bit differently than the original movie, where they play it off a little bit more. It's about the church and the town. This drive-in has a huge, part of the movie and stuff like that. Where, yeah, definitely, I liked it. I thought the changes that they did were cool changes. I remember reading the book, so I thought it stayed pretty true to book and the movie in general. Like I said, as far as like we said, when we come to remakes and things like that, yeah, not always a person who enjoys them all the time, but I thought this one was a well done remake. And like I said, and especially with the Stephen King remake, we always go like, once you've already made a Stephen King movie, it's already made. You don't need to touch it. It's
Yeah,
most Stephen King movies are perfect as themselves. There are some that like we said, we've talked about it. You know what I mean? We were like, you can't make it any better. And even though I do love those remakes of it 1 and 2, do I think they're better? No, maybe not. But I think they're just as equal.
yeah,
They're just as good, where it's like that's the kind of stuff I want to see. I don't want to see that. So I put that in, this Salem's Lot sort of in that realm of it, where yes, did it need to be remade? No. I mean, it been 20 some years since they did Salem's Lot, so okay, maybe. But it's like, once I saw the final product, it wasn't as bad as some other,
yeah.
remakes of Stephen King stuff.
For sure, man. Because I'm the same as you when it comes to like it. It's like, do I think they're on an equal par? I do. I loved Tim Curry as Pennywise. Absolutely fantastic. But there's there it's tricky when you get to talk about what people like about CGI versus like, you know, proper real like special effects. And with something like it, I do think there was a certain amount of benefit that it got, the remakes, a certain amount of benefit that they got from having that ability for such high quality CGI effects to be added in, versus with, the original it really just taking that like sinister look and keeping the overall effects to a minimum, except when necessary. Of course, you still got Tim Curry with the giant jagged teeth when, for that scene and whatnot. But no, you're definitely right about that. I will say though, one of the things I actually really liked about this movie that I do think will benefit the the Fangs and the Infernos is the fact that this movie, when you look at the time, if you were just to look up how long the movie runs, you might look at it and be like, oh fuck, 2 hours, damn. For a movie that you would think would run a slow burn, it really didn't. It went right. It went smooth through. Like, it told the story well. There was always something going on to keep you interested. There was really never a part of that movie that just had me like constantly looking at my phone, like time wise, like, Jesus Christ, can we just get to some action, or can we just find a way to eat up 20 minutes so I know that we're closer? I did like everything about the way the movie was designed to tell the story, but keep enough going on. Whether it was the panic of the sheriff, whether it was the kids being possessed and starting to try to collect everybody, the people who like believed in vampires trying to tell the people who aren't buying it, and then the people that aren't buying it realizing that the people were right the whole time, or the person was right the whole time. I did like the overall, speed of the movie. I did like the overall just, delivery time frame. I thought it did great for a 2-hour movie. It truly didn't feel that way. And I actually think that it can potentially benefit the overall movies and book of Salem's Lot, to be honest, where if you're going to watch the original Salem's Lot, which, look, I really do suggest to you guys, to you Fangs and Infernos, like, watch it. It's really good. It's so cool. It's 3 hours long. I'm not going to lie to you guys. And it has its moments of, oh dear. But again, it's so close to the book that it's kind of hard not to go that way. I got to tell you, though, for a remake, it's comparable as a almost possibly even a preference to the average horror fan or vampire fan, particularly, because you save an hour. It tells the story correctly, and you're pretty solidly entertained. So this is definitely something that I can see us revisiting, not necessarily for the next opportunity at a showdown, but I really do think it's going to work its way into our conversations of potentially better remakes, because I do actually think this is very high quality and I really liked it a lot. And I do love the fact that I don't have to commit a real chunk of time in my day to watch this movie. And I'm never going to stop watching the original Salem's Lot. I love that movie, but I really do have to be in the right frame of mind to know that I'm dedicating real time to watch this movie. And do I want to have my phone nearby or do I want to be dialed in? But with this movie, the 2024 Salem's Lot, it's very excellent as its version of Salem's Lot by itself, as a movie that I don't want to quite go so far as to say overtakes the original, because the original is still the original. But man, does it put up a fight, Devil.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I loved everything about this. I thought it was, well, like I said, well paced. It kept true to the storyline. Like I said, it didn't need all that extra filler to make it a 3 hour movie. I loved the violence in it. It was,
Yeah.
it was graphic. It was fast paced. I love the vampire aspects of this movie. I love one of the coolest effects on this movie that, it's not that it hasn't been done before, but I like the way that they did it, was the glowing crosses, where the crosses were glowing almost
Yes.
kind of like a light, like a beacon, where it was just like this bright ass, like fluorescent kind of light. Like, it was cool. It was just a cool effect. You know what I mean? There was a lot of cool effects in this, and even when they showed the crosses, at one scene where he was putting the cross on the one kid and he just banged him into across the wall, and then it backed him across the wall again. It like fucked them all up and stuff like that too. And I like the fact that, like I said, they touch the sunlight, man, instantaneously burning, and I love it. It had all the good tropes to it, that go to a good vampire movie. And it's got one of the coolest departures of a lead vampire in a movie that I've seen in a long time. It was such a cool effect. And we're gonna say right here, spoiler alert. Obviously, if you've seen the original movie and all like that, yeah, yeah, vampires usually don't tend to last very long. He gets a good stake in the mouth, and
Yeah.
it's a cool effect. And he leaves this big gaping hole in his mouth, and the kid that he was getting ready to attack the one kid, and he's laying down, and when that stake gets out of his mouth, you can see the hole in his mouth. You can see the guy that staked him. So it was a
I
really cool
love the
effect. I
fact you
loved
can
it.
see Ben through his mouth.
Yeah, yeah. So it was really cool. It was a cool way to dispatch, your normal everyday, vampire movie. Although theoretically speaking, I don't think that a stake through the mouth is going to kill a vampire. I mean, it's gonna fuck them up for a little while. You know, you definitely would need to move. Because in the scene, there's a bunch of cars that are all piled up. You definitely need to start moving some of those cars out of the way so the sunlight gets to them, because that seems to help. And even in this movie too, I liked it. Like you said, with the crosses, the newly formed vampires, it was a hardcore effect to him. It was, like I said, it was banging him against the wall. But then when Main Barlow got the crosses, it affected him a little bit, but not completely enough, where he was just like, yeah, you're gonna need a little more than that cross. And even, makes a reference, to the preacher of not, losing his faith, and then all of a sudden the cross goes back to being a normal cross again. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I thought that was one of the coolest effects. The eyes glowing throughout the movie when they the vampire glowing eyes, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, I thought overall, I thought the effects in this movie were pretty sick.
I'm definitely with you on that. And I definitely agree in certain ways. While I did love the stake through the mouth and the possible kind of severing of the spinal cord by doing it that way to allow for the kill, I liked it. I thought it was cool. And it worked, but yeah, it's my way of looking at it would be more like they stake him through the mouth, like pull it out to kind of like distract him or piss him off kind of a thing, which would then lead to a proper staking, which, don't get me wrong, an actual stake through the heart is what officially, finished out Barlow. But it did seem like that impale through the mouth was so devastating to him when it shouldn't have been quite as devastating to him. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely with you on that one. But I will say, though, there were a lot, and we even talked about it when we were watching the movie. There were 3 specific subtle nods that I loved in this movie that made me think of 3 other vampire movies, 2 of which we talked about previously, and one of which we kind of talked about just now a few moments ago, is the whole like cross on Barlow where he kind of shrugged it off. Very much reminded me of Lothos in Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Christy Swanson, when she holds up the cross and he just laughs at her and just kind of shrugs it off, like that's your protection, your puny faith. It reminded me of that in the Salem's Lot scene. Also reminded me of, there's one scene when one of the vampires is reaching for one of the boys and his hand goes into sunlight. It's very Lost Boys. It's very Kiefer Sutherland's David character, with him reaching forward, going into sunlight, and his hand turning into flames, which I thought was great. And then you also referenced a great one that I loved, where at one point the young boy gets a cross to his face to, again, bounce him across the room like you had said, but it left an impressionable burn cross on his face, which was very Fright Night. So I did love the fact that in the big picture, this is first and foremost a Salem's Lot movie. That's undeniable. That's unchallengeable. It just is what it is. But for a movie in 2024 to remake a movie from 1978, I thought was actually very cool to reference like a movie in like the mid 80s, like late 80s, early 90s, and late 90s. Whether they did it on purpose is up to anybody's interpretation until somebody actually speaks on it. But I like to think that's pretty cool to just do a small little tip of the hat to horror movies that preceded you, while still sticking very, very close to a proper remake that, frankly, I don't think will or would piss anybody off.
Yeah. I want to say that, I would hope that they put those little nods in to it, but yeah, I loved it. Yeah, like I said, I like seeing that, the little nods to other vampire movies and stuff like that throughout the whole time. So it's cool to throw that in, especially because, like I said, at that time in the 70s, when the original one, you could, I mean, obviously you have like the old school vampire movies that came out, in the 50s and the 60s, and Nosferatu and all that, which even theoretically, I guess, Salem's Lot's kind of a nod to Nosferatu, because it's a very, Barlow is very Nosferatu looking in this movie, versus like, your Bela Lugosi or your Christopher Lee kind of vampire, which is, your traditional vampire teeth and all that. Salem's Lot definitely went more the Nosferatu realm of, how a vampire looked. But yeah, like I said, overall, I think this is like I said, I mean, yes, you're always going to get brownie points for the old school OG one, but like you, I honestly think I prefer this one better, just because overall it's more entertaining. It's more that, and like I said, and it cuts that extra hour and just gets right to the point.
Yeah, it cuts the fat. It really does. And I do think, again, to the common populace, to the average horror fan, when they're sitting next to each other on the shelf, of which mine absolutely will whenever it gets released, hoping that it gets released as a physical copy. It'll absolutely be right up there with the rest. It is a movie that even myself I could see touching more often.
Oh
So,
yeah.
because it allows for that, because they and again, it's not that when they made the first Salem's Lot, it was made to be boring or drawn out or like suck your day away. It's honestly no different than the original It, which we referenced. It's a mini series. It's actually not
Made
a
for
movie.
TV.
Yeah, it's made for TV to be watched, on Friday night in June, and then finished the following Friday night in June. Like that's how its old TV stuff was designed, and that's how it was done with it as well. So yeah, when you watch it as one shot, of course you're going to be like, God damn. But you got to take into consideration that this was a made-for-TV movie and it was purposefully split into two parts, which is why it's so long. But that's what I really like about this. This was done specifically as a Salem's Lot movie based off the writing of Stephen King, and cutting the fat and really getting to the point. And on that, I really do think they score high points and high regards when it comes to this movie. Again, you're always going to get brownie points by sticking to the original, but I love the fact that with this movie, they were like, yeah, but let's just get to the kills, get to the point, and get to the conclusion, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up. Fangs out.
I will tell you, Devil, the thing that's also incredibly interesting I find about 2024, or at least the way that 2024 is kind of shaped up for us, is we've gotten to tackle like so many different topics, not only in our regular episodes, but also, of course, in 2024's end of 2024 episode. And it's just kind of interesting that when you look back over this season, we've talked about this, that, flames, murder, sharp fangs, killer clowns on multiple levels, that we've already since discussed two parts of a certain killer clown. So I guess it would be a little bit apropos, but also a little bit warranted, my dear friend, that we also discuss in the end of 2024's specialty episode, Terrifier 3. So what do you say, my friend? Why don't we talk a little bit about our beloved Art the Clown again?
Yeah. Like I said, whenever we started doing the poll, and we let the Fangs and the Ghouls and the Infernos, pick the top 5 movies. Like I said, everybody was blowing up on Terrifier 3. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things that, like, before we even start getting into the movie wise, it's just one of those ones where it's like it's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to Terrifier 3, because like we wish nothing more than the success to to the guys who Damien and and David and all the other actors and producers and writers of this series. And so awesome that this small little DIY project that basically cost almost those beginning movies cost almost nothing to make is like making these big huge splashes and basically saying fuck you to the movie industry, especially in the horror movie industry, that's saying you don't need a huge company behind you or huge production behind you to make movies that people want to go see. So I love that. And like I said, we've been down since the very beginning, but kind of like, kind of like when your favorite band comes out and you're like, nobody knows them, and you're like, yeah, yeah, but then once once everybody starts knowing it and everybody's going on, has a shirt of them and everybody's got the shirt. You see freaking celebrities that like pop stars wearing their metal shirts and this and that. It kind of reminds me of that, where like now Terrifier 3 is such a huge commodity that everybody is apparently Art the Clown crazy. And it's like, were you Art the Clown crazy before one? Were you into them like when 1 and 2 came out? Maybe, a Hallows Eve and all that? Or now are you like this like bandwagon sort of Art the Clown fan? So it's kind of like both, where it's like, you want them to have this huge success, but then again, when it blows up that big and that monumental, god damn it, fucking people, leave me alone. Goddamn scammers. Like, I'm gonna call you 17 times a day, even though you don't answer once. But yeah, I'll forget it. But yeah, but like I said, it's one of those ones where you just kind of wish that you like I said, you wish that this happens to a franchise, and like I said, nothing but love for all of it. But yeah, you do get a little bit sad that like it's become somewhat now commercial.
Yeah.
Where it's like this commercial excess and like everybody is popular and you're like, oh man, and now everybody in the world likes them, and it's like, okay.
Well,
You're
it's
like, oh man, you
because when as well as like popularity in general. Like for example, you and I have been to multiple cons with Damien and David, where we'll get in line, or in my case, I'll get in line, and 10 people will be in front of me for David, if that. Now, we were at a con recently where we had friends of ours that never even got to meet him, despite the fact that they were there early and committed to the experience, because the bubble popped at some point. And it's crazy because like we're OG Terrifier guys, and we were there for Terrifier 2 and the success, and it had already been in the theaters. It had already made millions of dollars. But still, when we would go to like MMC, NJHC, stuff like that, the lines were still very modest or not ridiculous. But then all of a sudden now Terrifier 3 is out. And again, all of these actors and actresses have been making the rounds like consistently, that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the fact that David's line in particular was that out of control for a guy that's pretty much lived at every con that you and I have gone to for like the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and I don't think that like I said, at the con that I was at, I don't even think they were prepared for it. Nobody was kind of prepared for this. You know what I mean? Like you said, he'd been at cons so many times that he was so easy. Yeah, you would maybe have to wait a little bit, but like yeah, his lines were like Freddie, Robert Englund kind of lines. You know what I mean? Like 5, 6, 7, 8 hour lines to meet the guy, which is insane. Because like I said, the year before, we seen him and walked up in like 20 minutes and talked to him and had conversations and stuff like that with him, and like could talk to them, talk to Damien and all that kind of stuff, and and have a good conversation and not have to worry about like being rushed because there's somebody else behind that that you're trying to get your experience but not try to ruin everybody else's experience. And yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it was like, I was definitely not expecting it. Like, and that's the thing about, like I said, with Terrifier 3 being like where it is now, it's like, everybody's wearing, like you said, everybody's wearing the stuff. Everybody's going to these cons now. Everybody's doing all this stuff. And it's like I said, it's that sort where like, yeah, you kind of like it because, you want that success for these guys so that Damien can make more movies, whether it be more Terrifier movies or just any movies that he wants to make in the future. You want him to have some, somewhat of a success, because obviously if he doesn't, you get to a point where you're making these movies and you're not making any money at all, or they're flopping, you're going to kind of go, okay, maybe I should do something else with my life. So you want these movies to be kind of big, but then all of a sudden, they blow up like that. I could even imagine for him himself, him and David just being like, yeah, dude, this is insane that we're like, we beat out, a movie, especially when Terrifier 3 came out. Like, and this isn't no love, no hate and no love for this. The time when this movie came out was when the new Joker came out. And I know like everybody was shitting on the Joker movie. And I watched it, I liked it. If you understood the concept of what that Joker movie was about and the title of it, that All the False or whatever, it's about like this freaking disease. It's a real disease that people will share delusions together. And
Yeah.
if you understand the concept of it, you'll understand why it's a musical, why it does that, and all those say that. But yeah, for a movie that has the Joker, which is a Batman related character, so it's an IP character. So people, whether or not they went to the movie and saw it and afterwards and said, "Oh God, this sucks." People are gonna go to see this movie because of it being a Joker movie, and it's insane that Terrifier 3 blew it out of the water. Like, it's
Yeah.
insane that a movie that like the Joker probably cost like $50 million or something like that to make, and Terrifier 3 was probably like 2 or 3 million, maybe if that, and blew, like I said, just blew it out of the water. So it's like it's great to see that, like, especially as a horror genre, because we always get that stigma that, like, yeah, horror movies don't really make much money. You have the little times where all of a sudden horror kind of comes back into the fold, and all of a sudden starts getting bigger and popular and stuff like that, and then it kind of dips back down again where people don't like horror movies, and then it kind of gets up its ride. But yeah, I like the fact that Terrifier and those guys are kind of like riding that wave of like, screw you, man. We're just gonna make movies how we want to make them. We're gonna make them vulgar. We're gonna make them, bloody as hell. And like I said, and it's awesome. It's huge, shout out to Damien and those guys being able to do the effects that they do
Yeah.
with the amount of money that they have. It's like that, it's awesome. All that shit is all practical effects. It's all stuff that you're literally touching. He's touching his stuff and doing stuff, and yeah, and like in this movie, they were always, if you watched Art the Clown interviews, David always talked about how in part 2, there were things that kind of got him a little icky, but part 3, he said there was one scene that freaked him out the most, and it's pretty cool that you can even freak out your own actors and actresses that coming on set, because you're gonna push that limit, and that's what I like about Terrifier 3, is it kind of pushes that limit of like what you should see and what you shouldn't see on a film.
Absolutely, brother. I'm definitely with you on that. Devil, other quick thing before we actually get into the breakdown of Terrifier 3, because I'm kind of piggybacking off of something that you mentioned a moment ago that I found like interesting. Do you think there's that potential for Terrifier 3's success, well, the Terrifier franchise's success, to be detrimental to people involved in the Terrifier series with their spin-offs? Not so much the actors and actresses. Like, for example, David did a movie called the Mean One that's already getting a lot of love and is already kind of developing its own little cult following. And I love it. I think it's a great, cool little Christmas Grinch movie. I think it's very cool. Also, Lauren Sienna, who actually canceled at the last MMC that we were at because she was filming a movie called, I believe, Monster, with like a very, I think it's like Robert De Niro or somebody, I forget, but it's somebody's in that movie that's very, that's very high up in the acting world. But anyway, not necessarily so much the actors and actresses per se, but I'm making more of a reference to like Mike and stuff, and the producers with a movie like Stream, which I forget offhand if we had it on the count, on the poll for the Fangs and Infernos to vote for us to discuss. I forget offhand if we had it there. I think we did. I just don't fully remember. But my point is, with everything that Terrifier does, from heavy gore to crazy twists to, that style, do you think it possibly risks the success of anything outside of Terrifier even despite the fact that Damien has since said, yes, I'm planning and there will be a 4, but there won't be a 5 because he doesn't want it to get stale. But do you think Mike, Phil for Falcone, the producers with side projects have a potential risk of not being as successful as they should be? Because if they don't do a gore fest, that maybe it just gets scoffed at?
Yeah, I mean, you always kind of run that, especially you look at old directors and stuff like that. I mean, it's just funny, when you go into something like Lord of the Rings, one of the biggest movies ever created. I mean, it's a freaking huge ass world, and the guy who directed that directed Dead Alive. So it's like you never really know. I mean, I guess in this world, it's kind of like, it's yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, I don't want to say not for sure. I honestly don't think that anything that Damien probably does and or the guys do probably won't hit as hard as the Terrifier franchise has, because that was just like I think Terrifier in that self, it was just a lightning in a bottle. It was just
Yeah,
some
it's its
random.
thing.
Yeah, it was just so, it was just so crazy that it blew up that big. It's just one of those things. Like, don't get me wrong, if he does another movie that has nothing to do with, he does another, that Damien does another movie that has nothing to do with Terrifier, and he just happens to do another horror movie, and even if that becomes a franchise, I wish him success. But yeah, I kind of feel like, with those guys doing other movies, they're gonna some people are gonna like ling on to like, okay, why, this series isn't as good as that series, or that one isn't as good as that, or why do they need to do, I mean, to me, I feel like in as far as the writing and as far as like the creativity and the special effects, I don't see Damien going really too far outside of the horror genre. Maybe thriller like ish, or maybe some science fiction kind of into it. But yeah, I don't see Damien. I mean, I don't see Damien or David, at least in my opinion, doing any rom coms.
Yeah.
I don't. I just not saying that that he couldn't act in those movies. I'm just saying, like, I don't really see that. But I mean, like I said, it's one of those ones where you never know. Like, like you said, Terrifier 4 is going to come out. You know that's going to be remotely successful, because if everybody who watched 2 and that blew up, and everybody watched 3 that blew up, that 4 is going to blow up. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I guess we're going to have to wait till time tells to see if he can, Damien and the producers and everybody else can still capture audiences. Like I said, I think, people like us, we're gonna go see his movies. Like I said, I mean, as soon as Stream came out and I found out about Stream, I watched it. It was fun. I liked it. It was a cool concept. It was a fun movie. It did have a lot. David was in that movie as well, and it had some of, some horror icons in that movie. Daniel Roebuck was in that. Felissa Rose was in it. You had Tony Todd, rest in peace. Tony Todd was in it. You even had a quick minute with Tim Curry in the movie. So, I mean, that's pretty badass to be able to have them in it. And like I said, was it as good as the Terrifier movies? No, but it was still fun. I liked it. It was entertaining. I thought it was a good movie. But that's the thing is, though, too, with the success of Terrifier, I think a lot of they're going to be judged on that. Like that. They're going to be like, well, yeah, well, Terrifier was awesome, but streaming it, or this movie, Terrifier was really good, like, or even like you said, with David being in the Mean One. I mean, if you compare the Mean One versus Art the Clown, yeah, Art the Clown is gonna get all these praises, and the Mean One, unfortunately, is gonna get shit on because it wasn't as epic and as great of a movie as these other ones. But then again, you got to realize, man, the first Terrifier movie, I love the first Terrifier movie. We've talked about Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2 and all of these.
Yeah.
Even the first Terrifier movie wasn't that super great of a movie. It's gory, and the effects were really really cool, but you could definitely tell it had low that low budget kind of feel to it, and it's just like, nobody knew that that Art the Clown was going to be what this generation's Michael Myers or anything like that. So that's the thing about it. I guess it's just time to tell. Time will tell whether or not they can continue. Getting that lightning in a bottle. But like I said, I mean, as long as they're putting out a movie that looks somewhat decent and somewhat entertaining, which I'm assuming they're going to be, because like I said, I think all the guys who produce and write and all that are all talented people, so they're always going to do stuff that kind of more likely interests our crowds.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to have that success, but are they going to be able to do it? I mean, who knows? Like we said before with Wes Craven and stuff like that. I mean, look at him. Like I said, the Nightmare on Elm Street one, huge success. Then he did a couple other movies that people were like, okay, yeah, they were okay, and this guy doesn't have it in him. And then, late in the game, he came back and did Scream and made another huge franchise. So who knows if Damien, with the Terrifier guys, maybe 10, they do a couple movies and maybe, they're fun and people like us will like them. And then another 10 years later, they make another franchise that's just as big as Terrifier.
No, 100%. Because it's one of those things too, where it's like those other movies, associated movies, they're gonna want to take advantage of that tagline from the producers of Terrifier, Terrifier 2, Terrifier 3, or however. You want that slash in this day and age sometimes need, that association, that tagline. But at the same time, it's like, well, this movie was really cool and I liked it, but where was my 50 gallons of blood? It's like, well, that's not the movie it is, though. Just because it's from the producers of 50 Gallons of Bloodifier doesn't mean that it's the same stylistic type of movie. But I'm with you, Devil. Only time will tell, man. And just like you, look, man, if it's got Damien there, if it's got Mike, if it's got Phil, and if it's got David, dude, I'm showing up. So definitely look forward to that for sure. But let's get into it, man. So let's break it down. So starting off, Merry Christmas there, my dearest Devil, as we talk about Terrifier 3, which is a Christmas movie. And so the thing about it is it starts off, you see 2/3 of it, but the movie starts off with a very brutal slaying of a family. Honestly, speaking of the mean one, very kind of how the Grinch Stole Christmas-ish, where it's, the kid kind of coming down the stairwell to see Santa. And then, ultimately the Santa being Art and, does what Art does best. Takes out mom, takes out dad, and does, which Damien did speak on, does take out the child, not of which you see, though. Because Damien did speak on the fact that where even in a franchise like Terrifier, which is about pushing the limits, pushing the boundaries, making you uncomfortable, there are certain things that he does deem, if it's not so much inappropriate, but just kind of an untouchable line. That's not right. And the visual slaying of a child was something he didn't feel was proper in this franchise. But yes, little man unfortunately does not get to see Christmas morning. And then, of course, it starts off after that scene with the introduction of the movie and then actually leads into the continuation, which is the mental institution where Victoria is, bringing Art back, because it's sort of moves a little bit back to then get you caught up, which shows, the Victoria and the rebirthing of Art, and then the loss of our actress that plays the Clown Cafe, and the very brutal slaying of our beloved Chris Jericho.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. Like you said, just like in the part 2, where it kind of continues on with the story and the linear of the story, backpedals a little bit to kind of go into it. Yeah, I like that they did that, because I mean, anybody who's obviously a Terrifier fan, if you watch the end of Terrifier 2, during like the little extra scene, yeah, you get the Chris Jericho scene. You're like, oh yeah, I thought he. And I like the fact that they brought him back in for this one to give him his moment and get him his due. And yeah, I mean, Yeah, he gets pretty messed up in this movie, and like I said, that's what I like about this. It's just like straight up just kills, boom, right into it. I love the fact that they continue the story with her, and going into, and like I said, having the birth of bringing back the Art the Clown, and I love the fact they go into this weird ass like house. And just like kind of, just I guess it was sort of weird, like all of a sudden she like cuts her wrists and dies, and the art just sits in a chair, and apparently it was a couple years later, I think, that the movie continued on, and
I think it's
yeah, I mean,
I think it's like 1 year.
yeah, like a year later or 2 years. I know it's a couple years. I think it's like I know it's with at least a year or so later,
Yeah,
because
because the kind of basically the plot of the movie is Jonathan and Sienna like recovering from all the trauma.
yeah, I know, like the Jonathan's is like basically going to college now, and she's just trying to live her life and doing all this stuff like that. But that's the cool thing about this, like you said, then it goes into that. I mean, I love the fact that there's backstory in this. So you do, again, if anybody hasn't seen Terrifier 3, we're going to be some spoilers in this thing. We're not going to try to spoil it too much, but there'll definitely be some spoilers. I love the fact that they go back in time and you find out who the dad was, which was awesome because he's a huge, we're a huge fan of the actor Jason Patrick. If nobody knows, from Lost Boys. So that was pretty sweet just to see, just to get to see him again in a movie that we love. And yeah, and then it's just and then I guess, like, goes into it where the cops come into a house and wake up Art the Clown and wake up the witch, or whatever you want to call her,
The witch,
and
the
yeah,
bitch,
the witch,
Gloria.
the bitch, and basically enslues into, like you said, the few scenes in this movie where they push the limit. And like I said, I guess they could have pushed the limit again with the kid, but like I said, respectfully, they know, you can't do too much with mutilating a child on, especially the way that they mutilate people. I
Yeah.
mean, it'd be different if it was just a dead, you see a kid and you just like, boom, boom, but they're gonna, Art the Clown's gonna chop them up. Yeah, you see a little kid getting chopped up, you might not be able to see, but ultimately gets into probably the one of the two biggest, craziest moments of the movie, where the witch bitch decides to have a little fun with herself with a
Self
glass
pleasure.
shard.
Yeah. Like, yeah, like while Art's doing his thing. And the funny thing is, like, I'm sorry, Fangs and Infernos, but it's one of my favorite moments of the movie that doesn't involve like a kill or something, because it's so good. And I don't know if it was improv or written in, or who gets the credit for it. But yeah, it's this scene where Art's being Art. Victoria is taking care of herself to Art being Art. Kind of Exorcist rosary style, if anybody's familiar with that scene. But after she's done, Art just looks up at her and just shames her. Just does the little shame thing to her. And oh my God, I don't know why, but it's hilarious, because of all the things, you don't see Art do like a thumbs up or an okay or a horns up or anything as like, yeah, or he's just kind of like naughty, naughty. And I'm like, I no pun intended, dude, I'm dead. When it came to that scene, I was just like, I can't. That caught me off guard, simply because it's so subtle and so hilarious after such a brutal scene, that you can't honestly, in my opinion, not love that 6 seconds worth of footage. But
Yeah.
I think it's so hilarious, dude. I love it, Devil. I just think it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about this movie too, and that was something that we discussed after we went and seen this movie, because I mean, I remember when we initially came out of the theater, I was like, fucking hell yeah, this is probably my favorite Terrifier out of all the Terrifiers. And I remember you being a little bit more reserved about that. You
I'm
loved it.
still that way.
I'm like, you loved it, but you still weren't as gung ho as the third one with me. And I think it's because, the first one was just straight up killer. A
Yeah.
little bit of funny, a little bit of comedy in it. Second one has backstory, same thing. Where this one is it's very brutal, and it's just as brutal as 1 and 2,
Yeah.
but with the brutality is a lot of more comedy side of it, where he's doing more stuff, where he's chopping them up and laughing or doing something. So it has a lot more shtick comedy in it with the horror, which like we've talked about before, where I'm more of the bigger fan of the horror comedy genre than Vampire was. So I think that's what it was. Where yeah, I mean things like that with the no shame kind of stuff. Yeah, everybody's gonna love that. Like I said, I love that. That's one of my favorite part of the movies too. But yeah, like just throughout this whole entire movie, it's a lot more. With the horror, he brought the comedy with the horror more than, like I said, more than the other ones. I think, like I said, like I said, 1 and 2 definitely has its moments of comedy, throughout the whole entire thing. It's always doing him, honking his horn or, doing like a joke gag or something like that. But I think this one just added that little bit of extra because he was going so much further in the gore and the horror that he just decided to add that little tropes of comedy into it. Like I said, to me, I mean, I loved it. I think, like I said, in my opinion, I mean, I love the first one and I love the second one, but I honestly think this one's just more my favorite, just because I like the whole Christmas aspect of this movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think it's just kind of funny, just like Jim just going crazy and stuff like that. And like I said, as we talk a little bit more about the movie, I mean, there's definitely some, when you get into the meat and potatoes and you started getting into towards the end of this movie and stuff like that. It's definitely some crazy twists and turns that come with this.
There definitely is. And I think you're right, dude, because I think that's kind of also what it comes down to with me. Is don't get me wrong, I'm very I love this series. I'm very pro this series. I love it. But like it did have me, I think that's what it did. It did have me teetering a little bit on my on the like the on the camp line, the campiness line, where Terrifier 1 had a little bit. Terrifier 2 had a little bit more. Terrifier 3 though definitely had more than that. And it worries me. I think it worries me a little bit that there might sway a little too close into the comedy aspect. Don't get me wrong. There's part of that kind of stuff that I love as well. I mean, the Fangs know this. You know this very well. I love my trauma movies. I love my full moon movies. So like, there's definitely a certain amount of horror comedy that I do definitely love and can appreciate. But I think with this one, it had upped its comedy and amped it up a little bit more, being that he's a clown mime kind of character, that it does make sense, but in comparison to the other two movies, I think that's what got me a little bit, where as much as I loved this movie, it's like I can't put it over two. But what I will say I do love about this movie, and this is also something that Mrs. Vamp is about as well, is like, for the Fangs Infernos that don't know, and many of you already do, Mrs. Vamp does not do clowns. She is not a clown person. She tolerates the Terrifier series though because of me. She knows how much I'm into it. She knows I'm a fan. So, but she does like those movies. But what I'm very excited about, with as of the recording of this this segment, the movie is about to be released physically, is that Mrs. Vamp was feeling under the weather and wasn't able to join us in the theaters. So I'm excited that she's about to get to see the movie, because the one thing about her, which is the one thing that I am really into, is I love backstory and I love learning about characters. That's the one thing I really love in movies that are multiple movie franchises, whether it's 2 movies or 3 movies or 8 or 9. I love what I can learn about the backstory of characters. And for example, with Jason Patric's character, Sienna's dad, boy, I am so excited for Megan to get to see this movie. I'm really stoked for Vamp to get to see this movie, because the thing about her is, like, she has become super invested in Sienna's character. So the fact that this movie is very dominantly about Sienna's mind frame, what she's been through, how is she coping, and what she's now learning about her past. I'm very excited for Mrs. Vamp's, getting up to date on Sienna's character, because she wants to cosplay. She would love to get that battle gear outfit that she has. So I think that's really, really cool. But anyway, yeah, that's one thing I think is very, very cool. You're watching the overall story arc of Sienna's coping, Jonathan's coping. Sienna's now living with, like, not like a foster family, but like a family, like an uncle and their family. And, like, now they have to sort of start dealing with the conflict of when she has her moments of being triggered, where Jonathan is just kind of cruising through. He's just keeping it inside and trying not to deal. But even he's got a certain amount of antagonist to it, where Sienna is dealing with the big scarring. Jonathan's more like being treated like the poking of the bear, because his roommate's girlfriend or hookup chick or whatever finds out who he is, and she's a podcast host of a serial killer series. So she's like, oh my God, you're that Jonathan? You're a survivor of the Art the Clown killings? What is it, the Mansfield Massacre or whatever? And she's like, you got to do my show. I need to be able to talk to you. So, of course, it gets him, he's handling it, but it gets him kind of in his non-comfort zone, where he's just trying to live his life.
Yeah. I mean, with that too, but backpedaling just a little bit, I have a question for you too. So with the comedy aspect of it, I want to get your opinion on this, because I just thought of something. So with the first one, he's Art the Clown. He's basically like you don't even know that he's a supernatural entity. You think it's just some dude dressed as a clown that's a killer. Then you find out that he's got the supernatural, part 2, you find out he's got that little bit of supernatural kind of aspect to him. So it's like that and like that. So now my question for you is, though, third one, right? So he's Art the Clown. We know him as Art the Clown, but he is cosplaying as Santa Claus. So do you think that that's why it's more comical? Because he's playing a character. He's not actually Art the Clown now. He's Art the Clown as Santa Claus.
I do think it's possible, Devil. I don't think you're too far off. I'd be lying if I said that you didn't make a good point as an honest possibility of where my head's at. I never personally looked at it deeply as a Santa Claus thing. I always just kind of looked at it casually along the lines of Art realizing the time of the season, and maybe realizing that he can go certain places as this. But there is a certain amount of comedy that I also think comes with it, where he's kind of like the ability to wear something kooky or do something funny. That I think is what ups the comedy aspect, because he is that kind of twisted mind. Like, for example, we go back to, Terrifier 2, and what's kind of the one thing, call it a look, call it a trademark, that you would say has become kind of a standout thing for Art? And those are probably the sunflower glasses, which is nothing more than him dicking around at a sunglasses rack. And the thing that's so funny about that is it was really only one particular scene, and those weren't even the only glasses that he wore, but it's become synonymous with his look, especially in that movie, is the sunflower glasses, despite the fact that he wore a pair of glasses that looked like a set of hands. He wore a set of glasses that had like the slinky eyes on them. Really, really funny. But leading into Terrifier 3, or I should say, now in Terrifier 3, there's the scene where he basically slaughters a Santa Claus and takes over the suit, and almost kind of Santa Claus style, where he's there to a certain degree, just kind of as art, like as a fan, where he wants to sit on Santa's lap and he wants to tell him what he wants for Christmas. He's like, oh my God, you're Santa. Like, we got to do this. And then, of course, because he's still art and he's still got twisted sense of humor, whether it deals with, urination or other things, once he triggers somebody else, whether it's in joy or out of anger, it triggers the masochistic kind of side of art. And then him ridding these people from that scene and then kind of taking over the character. So I do think the idea of him cosplaying a classic, frankly, mythological being definitely does add to the comedy of it, because you're like, all these people are being killed by Santa. Not that a killer Santa is brand new to the genre. There's a lot of that. But I don't think you're wrong in the possibility of that aiding to the campiness of the movie, because he can really do all these things where even if he murders somebody Art the Clown style and is seen doing it, you still have other people be like, this guy was killed by Santa, or this girl was killed by Santa, to somebody who might be seeing it from a distance, which makes it outrageous. Like, Santa would never do that. So I do think there's some possibility to that, dude, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, even in the movie, you've seen the trailers, but when you're seeing this movie where he's at the mall type thing, and you got the kids coming and sitting on, Santa's lap and doing the photos where he can do that. So I just think that, like, that whole aspect of it. Yeah, but like you were saying with, with Jonathan now, I think his character, like you said, Sierra's character kind of is still living off of these, that post-traumatic stress disorder kind of like feel. And like you said, the Jonathan kind of character just kind of it's just trying to live the rest of his life and stuff like that, and just try to be a normal kid and stuff like that. I think it's kind of a funny aspect of it, because if you remember in the second movie, he had that dark humor, and there was all this like kind of stuff to him where he was obsessed with the killer and obsessed with stuff like that. So you kind of figured he was going to go in this dark path, and then now he's trying to like stay away from that. Even with the girls trying to get some information from him, he's like, hey, I just don't really want to. Yeah, I don't really want to deal with all this kind of shit. But but like I said, yeah, it kind of goes into that. Yeah, you have the girl like, wanting to interview him for podcasting and all that stuff like that, and then that kind of leads into what would be the second biggest horror aspect of the movie. Where she's trying to convince her boyfriend to let him interview her, and he's like, I'll give you some nookie, and just like young kids do, fornication in the shower, and we get to see Art the Clown. Like, that's the cool thing I like about Art the Clown versus some of these other serial killers. You got these horror movies where Michael Myers has almost always had a knife. This guy has always got that. Where Art the Clown, like you said, he pulls out guns, he'll shoot somebody, he'll stab somebody. And in this aspect, he's got a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And he gets a chainsawing.
And he's not shy about where he sticks it in places. That I will say as well, because trying to be courteous to you, Fangs and Infernos, but I'm not gonna lie, you had enough time. But yeah, it definitely is an absolutely brutal scene, and I look forward to and I know they're starting to get out there as well too, but I really wouldn't hate for the actor and actress in that scene to make their appearance at cons, which I know they're starting to make the rounds. And while I do want to add them to a new poster, because my Art the Clown posters, Terrifier posters, have no room left. There is a part of me that's like, yeah, but should they have 8x10s, which I'm sure they will, of said scene? I kind of wouldn't hate that, So it's like, and who knows, maybe I'll just call upon my friend the devil to maybe whip something up unique for me that might incorporate certain things that could be kind of cool as a fun new little project. But it's definitely a brutal scene. It was definitely one, if not the scene that really has people like, holy shit. when it comes to that. And ultimately, it is the beginning of like kind of like the final arc towards the climax of it, which is a very, very interesting design climax. Because the thing is, I feel like we wouldn't really be talking about this correctly if we didn't at least momentarily mention the fact that one of the main conduits to art in the second Terrifier movie was the Pale Girl, who is not in the third movie. But while Victoria, the witch, is in both the first and the second movies, she's kind of a secondary character, as she's not only a victim in the first movie, she's just basically locked up in the second movie, and then is kind of the equivalent to Art's little pale girl for the third movie. So there's so much more of Victoria's character that you witness, her own brutalities. There's a little bit of like religious like play off in this, as she's wearing a crown of thorns at one point that she forces on Sienna at one point during one of the final major scenes. And then as Art and Victoria have been leaving bodies just in their wake, it gets to that overall curiosity of Sienna's past with her father and how much is really involved. Because there's a major supernatural involvement to the end of this movie with the final climax that deals not only with like basically portals to hell, but abilities to heal. And the fact is, I'm just going to kind of say it this way. Sienna's sword, the sword that she made from her father's drawings for her cosplay Halloween costume from Terrifier 2, it comes in just as a factor, as a kind of conduit for her when it comes to the final scene. Without trying to give overly too much away, it's a factor. It's something that she knows that she needs. It's something that she tells Jonathan she's going to need as he gets it for her. And then ultimately also leads to the potential curiosity that's making its way around is what happened to Jonathan. We're shown something, but the more you think about it and the more you kind of look back at the movies, it does give you a curiosity. It does kind of make you wonder, was that just for the sake of a mind fuck purpose, or did it really happen?
Yeah, you never know. That's what's gonna be cool. I like that. I like the fact that you find out that like, just like Art has this supernatural power. Sienna's kind of got a somewhat of a supernatural power too. She's got like this light inside of her, basically, sort of, where she can do things and stuff like that. Like you said, with the sword being a part of that and stuff like that, because the sword is sort of like, she makes a reference to the one girl that's in the movie. Hey, did you open up that one last Christmas gift? And then like knowing that the little girl knew that it was the sword, and the sword is sort of like the kryptonite kind of, or something like that. It's this ultimate weapon that they can use. And I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, it opens up. I love that, the fact that it opens up this portal to hell kind of thing, and all of a sudden you go into that, and it's like kind of wonders what part 4 is going to be like. Is 4 going to be sort of inside of hell, maybe? Maybe or there are going to be there are rumors that maybe, since they did a Christmas movie, maybe this is going to have a different kind of holiday maybe into it, or something like that. So not quite sure, but it's gonna be a fun ride. And like I said, I'm kind of hoping that they she just goes, Sienna just goes fucking jumps into hell or something like that, and
Right.
do this whole entire movie where the whole movie is basically in hell. Because could you imagine, Art's probably not the only supernatural entity that can do this. So imagine she jumps into this portal, and you got a whole entire movie of nothing but Art the Clowns and people like Art the Clown, characters like Art the Clown, that she's got to kind of go through to the final battle. So I'm kind of looking
Yep.
forward to seeing what they do with part 4, once we start hearing a little bit more about like the story, maybe a little bit of the teaser trailer or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like you said, with spoiler, not spoiler, somewhat spoiler. We don't 100% sure know exactly what happened to little brother Jonathan. It is alluded that he may have gone a little too over his head, but yeah, we'll find out when the new one comes out. I mean, I would feel like, I guess with people who haven't seen this, like in the spoiler part of it, I kind of feel like with the people who have gotten killed in this movie, and them going into detail of letting you see Chris Jericho's character get killed and whacked and everybody else, I feel like they would respect the actor and the character of Jonathan to have gotten an on-screen kill,
Yeah.
that's where I pose the question of whether or not he has gotten demise, because we didn't get to see anything. So I kind of feel like, and it's a possibility maybe that he did pass away and he is dead. And part 4, they might go back and show you what happened. Therefore, that where he gets his on-screen kill too. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Because yeah, we will for sure, Devil. Because my thing, if I had to leave, like, Vampire's final thought on Terrifier 3 and where it's going into Terrifier 4, there's two directions I could see it going to. One is kind of well, it's only because of this little aspect. So I'll start with that one. The little thing I could see it doing, where you had mentioned a holiday feel, is I could honestly see something kind of around Easter, since they've done these religious kind of like nudges and these little things. They've done the crown of thorns on Victoria's head, where then she forced it onto Sienna's at one point. And they and with this Christmas feel, but also other things that deal with, like, your things that you're familiar with, like the devil and things like that. I could see something like that, because that would only be basically 4 months later, depending on the direction they want to take it. Also, depending on how much time they want to give it, or maybe need to give it. But the other one that I'm leaning more towards about, that has kind of more of that final showdown due to unanswered questions, would be something along the lines of Terrifier 4, Art Goes to Hell kind of a thing, where I feel like there's this possibility of a overall showdown where you've got basically Team Sienna, where I can sort of see it based around 4 overall people, which is Sienna, potentially Jonathan, if we get that question answered. Sienna's like little cousin, who we didn't really touch base on, but she was just kind of she's kind of like, the final girl 0.5. She's kind of the other person that Art's kind of toying with, but that Sienna's also protecting. And then also the potential of Jason Patrick, Sienna's father, getting much more of a situation, more of an ability to do something. So there's this part of me that can kind of see, Sienna standing there with like Jonathan on the right, her cousin on the left, her father like right there. Same thing with Art. You've got Art the Clown. You've got, Victoria on his right, and then possibly the return of Amelia, possibly the return of Little Pale Girl on Art's left. And then if maybe a 4th character behind, if they wanted to keep it even, or just something like the heroes and the villains. That's kind of the direction I'm leaning a little bit more towards, is this kind of overall like hellish showdown. That's kind of where my mind's going. How about yourself there, my friend? What do you think? What's Devil's final thought at the moment of our own little cliffhanger to the Fangs and Infernos?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. You know what I mean? Like I said, we'll find out. Hopefully here within the next couple of months, maybe or so. At least get that little teaser out there or something. Just to let us wet our lips a little bit and figure out how we're gonna go. But like I said, I just kind of feel like with this success, with that ultimate success of this film, like it gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, that they're gonna get bigger. You know what I mean? I believe, the budget on this third movie was way more money than they had for the other 2 movies. So I feel like it's gonna still be in that, the fourth one, I feel like it's gonna have a bigger budget. It's not gonna be a Hollywood huge budget. They're not gonna get, $50 million to make this movie, which would be insane. And like I said, the amount of things that Damien and his crew have been able to do with the amount of money that they have, I couldn't imagine them having $50 million. Like, the things that they could do with this would be insane. They would, it would. I think it would probably ultimately end the world, because it would. You'd be seeing things that no human should be able to see, kind of thing. Because, like I said, with the amount of money or stuff like that, or you would just get, or they would probably, in my opinion, like, okay, Art the Clown, do this. Give him $50 million. I kind of feel like Damien and them would spend probably a good portion, if not almost all that money, on paying for licenses and cameos. Get a bunch of actors that you wouldn't think, so Arthur Clown can kill them. Get Arthur Clown to kill like Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, these like huge actors and actresses, even like directors or something like that. All these like big huge Hollywood wigs that would be kind of funny, especially if they're in hell. You know what I mean? You could just be like, well, all these actors are going to hell anyway, probably. So, yeah, so it'd be kind of funny, like I said, spend that kind of money. I could just see it. Either that or like licenses, man. Like, throw in some Disney characters instead of pay Disney a crap load of money and throw one of their characters in there. You know what I mean? Like this or that or stuff like that. So it'd be kind of interesting to see what they could do with a budget. But you know what I mean? Or
Chris
just
Jericho.
or just take that money and pay your actors. Not that he doesn't pay his actors well, but pay his actors way more well, because like I said, he ultimately, that he can make a good movie without $50 million, so he doesn't necessarily need that kind of money. But yeah, I'm kind of curious on that. But as we leave, this Terrifier 3 realm, and we get to this conclusion of 2024 movies. So, as the Fangs and Infernos have been watching, and all the ghouls out there that have been watching the series so far, as this episode going in, you notice that we haven't done our obituaries. This because we're going to do something a little bit different with the obituaries. We're going to kind of go the realm of what we do with our directors, but we're gonna do it here. I'm gonna spring this up on you right now, man. So we got those 5 movies. I want you to rank the 5 movies that we did from 5 to 1. So what's Vampires 2024 ranks for the 5 movies of 2024 that we talked about?
All right. For my 5 movies from 5 down to 1 for 2024. So this is the way that I kind of look at it, because I try to break it down not only on where I think there's potential for it to go, but also just mixed with like how I thought the overall like execution of things would go. So I hate to put it down there, but as it being the only one that's not entirely its own, fresh concept, would be Salem's Lot. Now, while I loved the movie, like we discussed, I was so pleased with not only the fact that they put some length behind it, that didn't feel like a slow burn, but didn't make you worry that it was going to be 3 hours like the miniseries. It is still a remake. It's still its own kind of thing. And I absolutely love it. Just like I said when we discussed it, I love the possibility of us revisiting it somewhere down the line, depending on how we decide to do that particular category, as when we bring back around better remakes kind of thing, because I really think they did an excellent job. But due to the fact that it's the only movie that's not its own specific original idea, that's the main reason why I have it last on my list. So that's the one that I like when it comes to that. When it comes to 4, the funny thing about 4 is I definitely had to do like some juggling back and forth when it came to that. I ended up going with Longlegs as my number 4. Again, really did enjoy it. I thought it was very excellently done. I mean, Nicolas Cage is a serial killer. That tagline alone is fantastic. I think that is a selling point for any movie when you just say Nicolas Cage as, because it gives people the idea already in their own brains of how they would see Nicolas Cage doing it. But I thought it was good. I really did enjoy it, just like we discussed as well. But again, when it comes to the end of the movie, I did feel it had a little bit, not so much fell flat, but it just, I wanted a little bit more. And I am a big fan of leaving people wanting more. And I just thought it was a little weak when it came to the ending of it. But I did like the twist, and I did love Nicholas's portrayal. So anyway, fourth on my list is Longlegs. Third on my list would be Smile 2. I really did love Smile originally. I thought the concept of that, I love the direction it has since taken the franchise. I thought it was really good. And based off the strength of the original movie is one of the reasons why I went in with high hopes for Smile 2, but I also felt that they delivered incredibly well when it came to Smile 2. I loved the solo specific of like the Lady Gaga, musician character, that it was specifically about her and her dealing with this, where I love what the original set up, where there's a few more different aspects in the original movie, but that's also because it's, as they say, it's a teaching moment. They're teaching you about what this entity is, why it grips you, what it causes, and how you can get away with it, whether it's finding a way to keep your life, but not likely keeping your life. So third on my list was Smile 2. Second on my list was Terrifier 3, actually. So I really love Terrifier 3. Like I said, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge mega fan of the franchise. They can do no wrong. And not only has Damien shown that he can make an amazing movie with a big budget and a low budget, and he's very passionate to his actors and passionate about his characters, he's also an amazing guy. I've talked to him on multiple occasions. He's always such a doll. Like, I really enjoy him as a human, as a person, and that also goes for David. In fact, that goes for the entire cast. I haven't met anybody from that franchise yet that was rude or just shruggy in any way. I love the movie, but it also does stem from, 2 previous movies. And number 1 on my list is, some people might roll their eyes because they're like, well, of course he would go that way. But no, I loved Abigail. It is the number 1 of my end of 2024s as a original concept that does have touches of throwbacks. Like I said, I love the posh Christopher Lee, pinky out English style vampire that her father was. I loved the concept behind a, kind of criminal, kidnapping gone wrong, where you thought it was going to be this particular way because you wanted this better life or what this would get you, to then find out that you were never in control. You were always just the prey. And I really love the idea of Abigail's specific style of vampirism, and the way that they tweaked certain things where it wasn't just about that stuff doesn't always work on you, that stuff doesn't work on you. But I love the fact that they amped up certain things that are a thing, like the sunlight, like the exploding of her hand, but it didn't hit any vital organs, and her being able to regenerate her hand after a certain amount of time. But the fact that regular vampires, you get that stake, it's a wrap on you. You get that direct hit of sunlight, it's a wrap on you in exploding bloody fashion. I really love the concept of Abigail. I love the way it was designed, and I love the way it was executed. And that is my number 1 on our end of 2024 obituaries.
Yeah, so which is kind of surprising. I figured, where we're gonna be at, which is kind of weird. Usually we're pretty good about usually doing it. My top 5 is actually completely different than your top 5 is. So
there's nothing wrong with that, my friend.
Yeah, which is cool. I think it's kind of cool. Yeah. So for me, number 5 on my list would be Smile 2. I liked Smile 2. I thought it was fun. I did like Smile 1 better, but I did like the concept of Smile 2. So, like I said, obviously when you do these movies, whenever you do a list, you always got to put something on the bottom, just because it doesn't necessarily mean it's the worst. Sometimes you can put movie on there that's the worst movie. But yeah, ultimately I believe that Smile 2 was number 5 on my list. Number 4 would be Salem's Lot. Like I said, I completely enjoyed that movie. I thought it was one of the best remakes as far as like, the whole Salem Lot. Like I said, I would almost go to, probably being cast into the netherworld for saying that it's possibly better than the original. But sometimes saying that's not always the greatest thing in the world. So, but in my opinion, I did find it a little more fun to watch, a little more entertaining, and it ran smoother versus the original. Number three would be Longlegs. Like I said, I love that movie. I love the whole Silence of the Lambs kind of supernatural feel, thriller seven kind of thing to it, and then obviously Nicolas Cage being the serial killer, being Longlegs. Just the scene in the interrogating room right there is just worth the money to go see that movie, or to rent the movie, or to buy the movie, strictly just for that, just for his scenes alone. Two would be Abigail. Um, I know. Like I said, I know that probably leaves with number one, but we'll get to number one. But number two, yeah, with Abigail, I thought it was literally probably one of my favorite vampire movies in a while because it was such a cool concept. I love the whole fact that this, like you said, you don't really know that it's completely what it is. Is it a crime movie? Is it kidnapping movie? Then you find out, boom, this vampire girl is gonna play with our toys and she's gonna have some fun and she's gonna do some killing and I just love the whole concept of the movie. I thought it was really fun, well done, and it's a movie that I've seen multiple times already. I've already watched it a few times already. So to me, and before I go into number one, because obviously you know what number one is going to be, I personally want to say that my number one should have been Late Night with the Devil, because if he can pick Abigail for his number one and being a vampire movie, I'm gonna pick a devil movie for that, which surprisingly didn't get. It was on our list for the top 10 movies, and nobody barely picked it. Which honestly, we went to the theaters and saw it. I think it's worth mentioning real quick. I
Sure.
love Late Night with the Devil. I've seen it a bunch of times already. I think it's a cool movie. It's a mix in between The Exorcist meets like this 70s TV show kind of thing, and I thought it was good. But obviously it didn't make our list, which is cool. Hopefully down the line, maybe we'll do a category where we can talk about Late Night with the Devil, and I like to get into it. Maybe a little bit of into my one of my series of devil movies, but I like to actually get and delve into it further as a possible one-on-one kind of thing. But we'll get into that. So, but obviously that makes Terrifier 3 my number one, which, yeah, I guess you can kind of say it's cliche because I'm going to go on that bandwagon of terrifying and Art the Clowning and, be like everybody else. The Art the Clown is, I'm going to say it right now, Art the Clown is the new Gene Simmons, because Art the Clown basically has everything from boxers, briefs to condoms that you can get Art the Clown's stuff on. And he's going to market himself and be the new marketing whore of 2024 and take over Gene Simmons' role because Gene Simmons is no longer wanting to, even though Kiss is no longer around, he's still going to market the shit out of that. And I think Art the Clown might actually beat him this year in sales.
I believe it, brother.
But anyway, yeah, like I said, I'm gonna put that as one just because I loved it. As far as all the movies go, it's has been my favorite movie out of all of them. I do love the whole Christmas aspect of it. I think it's gonna be up there with people's Christmas horror movies now, up there as far as what horror movies are you gonna watch around Christmas time, which we may delve into that again, another year. We might add Terrifier 3 again just because, being Christmas horrors that we are, and like, when you go into these, there's a lot of good Christmas horror movies, but most Christmas horror movies are usually terrible. So that's the thing about it. I mean, there are some good ones, and you can always go in the realms of like different ones, but I think this one, I think Terrifier 3 is going to be up there as far as everybody's top like 5 horror films to watch that are Christmas related. So I think that's where I'm going to put that one. But yeah, so that's the Devil's top 5, and anybody who disagrees with me can go follow Art the Clown and everybody else in hell, and then you're really going to lose because that's my world.
Absolutely. So that's the way it's going to be. But Devil, I will definitely agree with you on that, man. I look forward to a future segment that we have where we can break down Late Night with the Devil. I think that would be a lot of fun, man, and I really looking forward to that. But Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls, that is the way it is going to be. That is the way it has been established. Number 1 for the Devil, Terrifier 3. Number 1 for Vampire, Abigail. But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you super enjoyed this breakdown of the end of 2024. You guys have yourselves an absolute great rest of your year. 2024 was a great one for movies, great one for horror, and we really, really also appreciate your guys' support when it comes to season 1 of the Vampire and Devil podcast. But there's so much more in store for us. But you guys are going to have to wait to check it out when we choose to launch it, when Devil says it's so, and when Vampire flutters down or I get done with my nap and I'm ready to talk about it. So we will talk to you guys ever so soon, and there'll be a little bit more fire, there'll be a little bit more blood, and there'll be a lot more gore, a lot more horror. We appreciate you guys. Great 2024. Looking forward to season 2 of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Horns up, Fangs out.